What is happening, party people? Welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Each week we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated Classic servers. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. If you're new to the show, Countdown to Classic goes through your expert input on everything relating to the sure-to-be amazing World of Warcraft Classic. So, over the weekend, I was lucky enough to sit down for 3 separate long-form interviews with even more former Blizzard developers who worked on World of Warcraft back in the day and helped bring us the game that we all came to know and love. I chatted with Kevin Jordan, Bo Bell, and Alex Brazzi, who each had distinct roles from each other, and I talked to them about what went into making the game, with a few listener questions thrown in as well, as we do here at Countdown to Classic. So today we're sitting down with the second part of this trilogy with Bo Bell, who talks everything vanilla World of Warcraft and also gives some speculation on what's to come with Classic. Now, if you're enjoying these in-depth conversations that Countdown to Classic brings you on a regular basis, please do visit the show's Patreon page to see how you can help support Countdown to Classic continue to bring you more of the content that you're about to hear today. Alternatively, you can also help the show out by mentioning the show to a friend, perhaps in-game. Talk about what you hear on the show and where you heard it on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, or wherever you actively discuss things. Follow me on Twitch at Countdown to Classic, or leave the show a review on iTunes. If you want to hit me up with some feedback or submit a memory lane or anger management of your own, you can always get me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com as well. On top of that, if you can't get enough of me for some reason, then please do also check out my other podcast, The Cinephiles. That's SINNERFILES.com. If you haven't already, for some great comedic takes from myself and the 2 other knuckleheads over there on all your favorite movies. But with all that said, let's get to today's in-depth interview. All right, we've got another caller on the line now, and it's time for yet another very special Countdown to Classic interview. I've been fortunate enough to secure yet another former World of Warcraft developer from back in the day. For those of you who have been listening to the show recently, you've heard that we've spoken with John Statz, and luckily enough this weekend I got a trio of former staff from Blizzard. We're doing back-to-back interviews with Alex Brazzi, Kevin Jordan, and right now we've got the one, the only, Bo Bell. Bo, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure, mate. Now, what I'll do is I'll give people a little bit of an idea of what you did while you were at Blizzard and while you were working on World of Warcraft, just very briefly. And please feel free to correct me if there's anything I get wrong or if there's anything to add to it. But you've been involved with some really well-received Ask Me Anything sessions over at Reddit recently, obviously with the promotion of John's book that a lot of people have jumped on. And when you got involved with that, the basic sort of synopsis behind you and your work was that you're an exterior level designer. You created zones such as Loch Modan, Duskwood, Moonglade, Thousand Needles, Silverpine Forest, and Durotar. You helped on other zones with the other exterior level designers. Kind of you all chipped in a little bit here and there, and you worked on QA for almost 2 years before moving on to WoW. You also tested Diablo, StarCraft, and Diablo 2, and you wound up leaving Blizzard in 2005. Is that all about right?
Yeah, it was actually left at the end of 2004, right after the game shipped. But other than that, yeah, exactly.
Okay. When did you actually start at Blizzard?
I actually did 2 little stints. I did in, the very beginning of 97. Was it 90? No, it was the beginning of 98, sorry. Very beginning of 98. For about 4 months I worked there, and I was working on I was hired initially, to work in QA on the port for Diablo for the Macintosh. I had a friend that worked at Blizzard in QA, named Frank Gilson, who, long story there with Frank. I had met Frank long before then, but, he was kind of instrumental in getting me several jobs throughout my life, which is kind of weird. But one of them was at Blizzard, But when I had found out that he worked at Blizzard, I was like, hey man, get me a job there. And, and he was like, do you know anything about, DOS and Windows? And I was like, nope, I'm a Mac guy. And he was like, sorry, can't help you. And then he came back, I don't know, like a year later and just called me up one night and was like, hey, you still know Macs really well? And I was like, yeah. He's like, come on down for an interview. And okay, cool. So I got the job doing that. And that was my 8-hour days were working on the port. And by the time I got there, it was already pretty much just rock solid for the most part. So literally all I did was 8 hours a day play Diablo, with the 3 other, QA guys that were assigned to that task. And then after that, if I wanted to stay late, which I did often because, we would get OT for it, was to work on StarCraft and test that. And yeah, there was they gave the green light for overtime at that point. Like anybody could just stay as late as they want, have fun. So we did that a lot. Like, I mean, practically lived there. At that particular office, they had showers. And so I would take my blanket and pillows down there and spend the weekend, at Blizzard's office, just working basically the entire time. Like we would work for, I don't know, 12 hours or so and, order food or whatever and take a break, play some, Nintendo 64, play like StarCraft or Mario Kart or something. And then go to sleep, wake up at 4 a.m. and just clock back in. And that just went on for a few months. And then, I ended up leaving, after that. And then I came back about 9 months later, and that's when I started working on Diablo 2. And then after that, it was World of Warcraft and beyond. And then my career as a game developer, as a level designer for real, basically.
First important question has already arisen from what you've said. Who was the best Mario Kart player in the office?
Man, I don't even remember. I know Chris Orechi was good. He was my buddy there. Jeff Frazier was good. I don't remember really too much about that time. That was literally almost 20 years ago. Actually, it was over 20 years ago.
Well, it's one of those things talk about, you obviously, bunked over the weekend there and I think I would have done, and many people would have done the exact same thing. And I believe Alex Brazzi might have mentioned it just in passing in my chat with him yesterday about OT. And just very briefly to go into that, it's interesting that Blizzard did actually offer the OT pay. It's something I would never even consider was an option with the game development company, because I just would have presumed that absolutely every member of staff would take them up on it because that's what you'd be doing anyway. Well,
so sort of. The way it worked, and it still kind of works this way at Blizzard as far as I understand. But the way it worked at the time was that if you were a salary employee, then you didn't get overtime. And if you were hourly, then you did. And as far as I know, the only hourly employees were QA and tech support. Everybody else was salary.
Okay.
That was definitely the case for me when I transitioned from QA into, the level design position on WoW. At that point, I went from hourly to salary. And in fact, I actually took a pay cut because of how much OT we did in QA. My salary wasn't as much. But that was perfectly fine because, now I'm making the games. I'm not just testing them. And, that's very huge difference when you're in that position. Cause when you're in QA, all you want to do is be on a dev team. That's why you do it. Nobody's going into Blizzard going, yeah, I want to be in quality assurance the rest of my life and just test games. They're going in going, I want to be a developer. I want to work on the games. And I was lucky enough to be one of the ones that, made that transition.
Well, talking about making that transition, just before obviously we're really going to get stuck into the nitty gritty of some of your work on World of Warcraft. For everyone listening, that's obviously going to happen. But one of my points of sort of morbid curiosity is this life of, someone working in QA that you've mentioned. You've gone through sort of the trials and tribulations of just hours and hours and days and a long time of QA work. And John mentions it in his book. And I guess, is it fair to say that, I'm not trying to demean the work of QA in any way, shape or form, but are they like the grunts and the absolute, cogs that make the machine move? And, what can you tell us about people that work in QA? And obviously their dreams are to go further in the company. What's that progression like? And is the dream alive and well at Blizzard?
So, yeah, the dream is, it's a foot in the door, right? I'm going to use it to the best of my ability and try to move up. Same thing with tech support. Most of the guys in tech support, the same way. It's different now because when I was there, tech support, all of tech support was in the same room with QA. It was a giant room. It had to be 200 feet long or something. And one half was QA and one half was tech support. And, those guys were in it for the same reason. And yeah, it's this weird thing where, a lot of companies, I've learned after leaving Blizzard, a lot of companies don't have internal QA, don't have internal tech support, don't have that type of just situation. Blizzard's one of the ones that did that, and they definitely always looked internally first if they could. So generally, pretty much every producer that worked at Blizzard for the most part, at least back in the day when I was there, they all came from QA. Same thing with the designers. Eric Dodds, who was a designer on World of Warcraft, he came from QA. John Yu, who did the items, he came from QA. All the exterior level designers, every single one of us came from QA or tech support. We had one guy from tech support. Oh no, we had two guys from tech support. Sorry. Alan Lapidus was also from tech support, but it was, the first, so there were 6 total exterior level designers that were hired. But it was 4 of us initially. That was myself, Matt Sanders, Josh Kurtz, and Mark Downey. Mark Downey was from QA or from tech support. The rest of us were from QA. And then about a year and a half later, we hired Jim Chadwick and Alan Lapidus, and Jim was from QA and Alan was tech support. Okay. So they definitely mine QA for those roles. Carlos Guerrero, who was also one of the producers on WoW, he also came from tech support. Just a bunch. Kevin Jordan, he was tech support also.
Ah, excellent.
Yeah. Actually, sorry. Carlos was in QA with me, not tech support.
Okay.
He might hear this and be offended. But now QA, yes, QA is definitely, I'm going to say the backbone because it doesn't matter how awesome the developers are. They're going to create bugs. They're going to create problems. And yes, as a developer, you test your things, to the best of your ability, but you've got a deadline. You got stuff you got to work on. You can't thoroughly test everything. And without the support of QA, you're going to release very buggy, horrible games, basically. So yeah, the Blizzard definitely appreciates their quality assurance department. They always treated us well when I was there. We shipped, one thing that's not on my resume, quote unquote, is, we also did the Warcraft 2 Battle.net edition while I was there. Mm-hmm. And I shipped that also, but, nobody really cared. But yeah, when we shipped it, they took us out to Dave and Buster's for a day and see a movie, just quality assurance. It wasn't a whole studio or anything. It was just us. That was a little thing for us that was cool. We actually went and saw Fight Club, and that was only because there was nothing else playing and nobody wanted to see Fight Club. And when we were done, we were just blown away and oh my God, I can't believe that movie was so good. Cause I don't know if you remember, but the trailers for it were terrible.
Right. And then obviously the movie turned out phenomenal. Well, I would ask you this. What would I don't know how you all felt sort of pouring out of that session of Fight Club. What would the number one rule, what would the first rule of Blizzard Fight Club be? You don't talk about the game?
Yeah, you don't talk about the game. That's number one rule. And that's hard to do. It's, it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you got friends that are gamers and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, just keep your mouth shut. Don't talk. Don't say anything. As you get further into the industry, you realize, okay, that's not that big of a deal. I mean, they have you sign non-disclosure agreements
right
when you get hired in any aspect of game development. You're always got to sign that NDA. And it's kind of a situation of like, yeah, you tell your friends and, like myself, I don't just tell my friends. I tell like my best friends and that's it because I trust them. I've known people that have told their friends that weren't so trustworthy and got in trouble.
Yeah.
So that's the number one rule. Just keep your mouth shut. Don't, like for instance, I would never come on this if I was working at Blizzard still.
Yes, I understand.
Because that's how it works. Like you don't talk to the press. They have the face of the company. They have their PR. They have their marketing, all that. And it's because slip of the tongue and
I've learned that lesson the hard way. I've tried. I've had a few of them say yes to me, but it's fine if the individual says yes, but the company says no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they got to protect their brand, and it's understandable because people say stupid things sometimes.
Yeah, and I found it interesting that obviously, I think someone mentioned to me once that I think it might have been Blizzard PR that actually said that only very, very few, maybe like a handful of employees actually receive some kind of media training. So that's the only people that are authorized to say even, hello on the record to the media.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, even when I was back then they didn't have that. We had Bill Roper. That was it. Like Bill was the only one allowed to talk to anybody, basically.
Well, John tells some really interesting, sort of anecdotes about Bill and his role in the game. And if listeners aren't familiar, Bill Roper is someone who worked on the initial, I think PR of the game. Is that right to say?
So I didn't know Bill super well. All of my interactions with him were incredibly positive. He's just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. But I'll give my take. And this is just my memory of how it was, but, I want to say he started in QA too, but I don't know if that's true. But I know he did voiceover work and I know he was a producer also. And he's very charismatic. He has a big personality, great guy. And he just kind of naturally fell into the role of being like the face of Blizzard for a long time. I remember actually when I was there, it was like maybe 2003 or so. I think it was IGN. One of the websites was doing a, top 50 most influential people in the video game industry of all time. Right. And they called up and got a hold of Bill. And Bill, cause they were like, it's Bill Roper. He's super influential. He's the reason Blizzard's Blizzard. And he, being Bill and, knowing what's going on is like, no, you got the wrong guy. You're talking about Alan Adham. You're not talking about me. He's like, I'm the face of the company. Alan is the one that made Blizzard, not me. And so they had to actually not make a correction, but they, cause they hadn't published it yet, but they, really had to kind of rethink what they were doing because they, like everybody else at the time, just thought it was all Bill. And not to, try to say anything disparaging about Bill. I mean, he was huge success and, part of the reason Blizzard is Blizzard, but, but yeah, he was our face man. He was our guy.
Right.
But yeah, he ended up going to Blizzard North, after Diablo 2 shipped. So actually before Diablo 2 shipped, he was like an emissary sent up from Blizzard South to kind of watch over what was going on up there.
Right. Well, you mentioned that obviously, you left Blizzard many years ago now. Are you able to tell us, in whatever detail you're allowed to say, what are you working on now? What are you doing with your professional life at the moment? And do you have any work online that you'd like to plug, that you'd like to send people to?
Yeah, right now I'm working in Austin, Texas, and I work for a company called Phaserlock Interactive, and they have released 2 games so far, both VR games for the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive. The first game they did was Final Approach, which is this kind of it's hard to explain Final Approach. Final Approach it starts off as this like kind of air traffic control simulator where you use your hands in virtual reality to like direct planes to land. You have to like grab the plane and land it, by drawing a line, the plane follows. But it gets a lot deeper and, aliens attack and there's combat and crazy stuff going on. But it's a VR experience, / game. And then the next thing that they did, was a bow and arrow game called Twisted Arrow, which is, in my opinion, still the best bow and arrow game, for VR. And
number one in that niche category.
Yeah. There's other bigger names currently, but, and I've played them, but the mechanics and stuff just don't reach ours. My team just did an awesome job on that game. And then I was hired about 1.5 years ago, to work on a game that we just really pushed this past week at, Oculus 5 Connect or Oculus Connect 5, and prior to that to the Tokyo Game Show, which is called Final Assault, which is sort of a pseudo sequel to Final Approach. It's a virtual reality RTS MOBA like game. So the mechanics are very similar to Final Approach. You have units, you place in the world. And you're fighting against an opponent, either AI or another player, and you control them by reaching out and touching them and drawing paths for them. And it's a very different take on RTSs. A lot of the RTSs that are in VR currently are really trying to do, they're trying to like take StarCraft and put it into VR. And VR's not built for that yet. It's very clunky. So we went for a lot more streamlined approach. We don't have base building. We don't have unit upgrades per se. Things like that, like no tech trees, nothing like that. It's UI in virtual reality is very different than it is video games. It's like normal video games. There's a lot of things that are just very different as a developer when you switch over to VR that you have to relearn a lot of things. And it's frustrating, cause I've got, close to 20 years under my belt and I go there and it's like, oh no, you've got more like 6 months of experience. Oh. There's so much I had to relearn. It wasn't relearn, but just learn. It's good cause it's brand new. It's like, in a typical, just console game, for instance, if you want to do a cinematic or something and, break the storyline with, this cool cinematic. You just can't do that in VR. It makes people sick. It makes them fall over. You can't guarantee they're going to be looking in the right direction because you don't have no control over that. But in, a traditional game, you control the camera. But in VR, they are the camera. There's nothing you can do. So you just kind of hope for the best. So you try to avoid doing things like that in VR. So, but I'm loving it. Like VR is awesome. My company, Phaserlock, is awesome. In fact, I will say, I've worked at several companies and none of them have been close to Blizzard except for Phaserlock.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to like blow smoke up Phaserlock's butt or anything like that. I doubt anyone from there is actually even going to listen to this. So, but no, it's totally true. Like just the camaraderie and the feeling of family.
Okay.
It's huge there. And that was huge on WoW also. Like John has said it several times, we were a family, and that's totally true. And that's what happens when you work 14 hours a day with people for 5 years or so.
Fair enough. Well, let's go into your role in that family, and sort of as I do on the show, we've done a little bit of a easy introduction for you. A few layup questions there, but now we're going to get into the nitty gritty and roll our sleeves up and see how we go. So you were an exterior level designer, and the first thing I wanted to put to you was an interesting comment that you made in the recent Ask Me Anything session with John. And it was regarding the putting together of Durotar that you gave as an example. So you said the following. You said, what I'm saying is we didn't just have a lot of freedom. We had all of the freedom. Yes, Metzen and Bill Petrus, the art director, would stop by frequently and check out our stuff and give feedback. But it was mostly, that's cool, I really dig it, or that's badass. Or, when being critical, and this is a direct Metzen quote, it needs more pepper. So my follow-up question from that comment that you've made is this, and it might seem like a silly question, but I was speaking with the artist who created the show, new logo for my show, Countdown to Classic, just the other day, and they said they love it when the client knows exactly what they want, so they can get down to the nuts and bolts of it in their design. So I know it seems like a rather crude analogy to draw, but in the instance of working on World of Warcraft, was more or less freedom preferred by you as a designer?
So, okay, I'm probably going to go on a kind of long-winded rant about this.
Go for it. Go for it.
Because Blizzard taught me, for a game developer outside of Blizzard, and probably at Blizzard now, but they taught us a lot of really bad lessons. Mm-hmm. Because they didn't work like everybody else. Mm-hmm. Traditional game companies have milestones. Are you familiar with the term?
Milestones?
Yeah. And
in terms of game development? No.
Yeah. So a milestone is basically, your publisher, whoever will say, you got, $50 million to make this product. And we're going to put gates in place, where we will give you more money. We're promising you 50 overall, but we're going to start with here's 10 million, get going. Once you hit, these milestones, right? Once you hit these specific goals, we'll give you another chunk, and you just kind of keep going. That's how they get paid. Blizzard doesn't work that way. Blizzard's, for a lot of stuff, they're not self-funded, but they keep money in the bank. At this point, they're completely self-funded, but back then, they still relied on their publisher, Vivendi or Havas or whoever it was that was owning them at the time. But even then, they didn't have milestones traditionally. Every other game company has milestones. So you're working towards this milestone goal all the time. Blizzard never did that. And so that was shocking to me when I left and went to my next company, because I'm like, what the hell is a milestone? I mean, why is it so important? It's cause if we don't hit it, we don't get paid. It's, all right, let's do that. So, there was that. And then, as you said, with your artist that did your logo, that's a very different,
absolutely
situation. Yeah. But at the same time, it's not. At Blizzard, I think a lot of it was, they were making it up as they went. We were all making it up as we went. By the time I started, they had kind of a rough idea of what they wanted to do and what the zones should kind of look like. But even then, when we got hired, there was 4 of us that came up all together. They literally told us, it's this is your guys' playground. You're going to tell us what it's supposed to look like and what it's supposed to feel like. So go for it. And literally the first 8 months, that's all we did. We just played around with the editor. Nothing we did in that first 8 months shipped. Some of it kind of shipped, but not really. It was all basically throwaway work. And the stuff that you see from the very, very, very early screenshots, the very first ones, that's all from that time period where we're just playing with the textures, we're playing with the terrain, we're trying to figure out what looks good, what doesn't, that kind of thing. They're still trying to figure out the lighting. So we really didn't know. And they didn't know. And that was why we had so much freedom. Whereas moving on in my career further down the line, it's more what you're saying, with your artist, who's I really like it when they know what they want, right? Because I've worked at plenty of places where they didn't know what they wanted. And they, to coin a phrase for my current creative director, they like to play Bring Me a Rock, which is they tell you, hey, make me a rock. And you're like, cool, here's a rock I made. And they're like, no, that one's too jagged. Bring me one that's smoother. Oh, okay. You go make a really smooth rock. They're like, nah, it's too smooth and it's not oval enough. Okay, let me go do that, right? And it's just over and over again as you keep bringing them rocks until you finally give them one that they like.
We like settle down, Goldilocks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas Bill Petrus and Metzen, they had a very different take on it. It was either, it was very rare that they were like, I don't like that. That was very uncommon for them to pull that out. Instead, it was generally like, that's not what I was expecting, but that's definitely cool and that's good enough, and we can work with this. And I hate to say it, but every MMO I worked on after WoW, that was one of the biggest problems that they had, was they always wanted they had this very specific vision, even if they didn't even know what it was, but that just wastes time. And they knew at Blizzard, we don't have time to waste. If there's a bar that we're going to hit, as long as we get to the very bottom of it, at least, we're good to go. And that was just a huge thing. That's why WoW shipped. This is because those guys were forgiving and they weren't prima donnas and like, no, that's not exactly what I wanted. So start over. It was, yeah, that's cool and that's good enough. Move on. Keep pumping this stuff out.
Now, you mentioned obviously the name of Chris Metzen, someone who many Warcraft fans are very, very familiar with. And right. Chris has obviously since left Blizzard and is, I think it's fair to say, somewhat removed from, talking about the game at this point, and is off doing his own thing. And that obviously wasn't always the case, and he very much so was one of the driving forces behind the look and feel and tone and lore of the game once upon a time.
Right.
Now, in working with Chris, you've just mentioned that he would often come up to you and would very, very rarely, if at all, reject anything. But he obviously had a design in his mind for what he wanted things to be. How much did he kind of impress upon you to follow his ideals, or was he really encouraging of as you say, you were making it up as you go along? And I know in the legal industry, we talk about it as, you've got to be able to play jazz. If you can't ad-lib as a lawyer, which is what I do, I'm a criminal lawyer here in Australia. If you can't play jazz, you're not going to be very good at what you do. And it sounds like to a certain extent that is the case very much so with what you were doing as well. So I guess what I'm saying is, what was the balance between Chris's plan and what freedom your plans were given?
So, yeah, I mean, the thing was that when I say that we were making it up as we went, that's totally true, but it's not, because, I was pretty much lowest rung that you could get, right? Like I was, a grunt, fresh out of QA, my first development job. The guys above, like Chris, Bill, the producers, they had a plan. Alan, they knew what was going on. And it's not like they were trying to hide anything from us. It's just, I was just young and naive and, didn't know any better. So, okay. But even then, like, they still, like, until we started building things, they didn't really, you couldn't envision it. Like, you could see it in your head, sure, all you wanted. But the closest we had to really compare it to was like EverQuest. And what we were doing, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to disparage EverQuest, but our stuff looked way better. But Bill and Chris really, they had the vision of what it should look like. To give props where they're due, Bill, huge influence on the way the game turned out, but Chris was his boss, and Chris was the one that made the final say. And again, like I said, Chris, very easy to work with in those situations. I can't speak for anybody else. In fact, I've never heard anybody bitch about him. But I'm sure there's been stuff said since I've left there, but, I never had anything bad to say about him. He was always great to work with. But yeah, if anything, it was, delightful, I should say, because Chris would get really excited when you'd show him something, and he's like, "Oh my God, yes, that is Darkshire. That's amazing. Like, that is awesome. I love it." Because he has this idea in his head, but it's not this fully fleshed out, thing. He's not like drawing up concepts of every last little thing in the game. There's no way he could do that. So he was really letting us play in his world, but at the same time, it was his world, and he was the one that was, really dictating what went where, but at the same time, there's a lot of things were, put in the game, implemented by us that weren't part of Chris's plans. But that's the testament to him being such a good creative director, is the fact that when he saw those things, he didn't go, no. That's terrible. I didn't think of that, so throw it away. That's awesome. I love it. Let's write a story around that, because, that's generally what we would do, as exterior level designers is, we had a whole zone to complete, and we had like 5 or 6 POIs, that were given to us up front, and, there's a lot of space to fill. So, we had to come up with things and like try to tell stories in them, and, then the quest guys would take it and they'd run with it, and they'd come up with cool backstories and whatnot, and, really do what we took and, push it forward. But again, like I said, there was a lot of learning throughout the whole thing. It was a lot of us figuring things out as we went. And I look at the retail version of the game now, like Battle for Azeroth and Legion and stuff, and zone wide style, like they blow us away. Like they have it down to a science. Like they know what they're doing, and it's way, way better. And I'll give a shout out to the current lead of the exterior level designers, Jim Chadwick, who was one of my best friends back at Blizzard, and one of the guys that was in QA with me, and the guy that came up after a year, after I'd gone up there. Jim's awesome, and he is doing amazing things with that team. So,
we'll have to throw him. We'll have to throw him a link to this one now, so he gets to hear the shout out. Now, you mentioned Darkshire, and it's great that you mentioned that there. Very fortuitous timing, as my very next question was about Duskwood. And you mentioned in the AMA that you really love Duskwood, as do I, as do so many players of the game. For me, it's a really special area. It's something that just stands out so much from the crowd in terms of zones in the game. Now, when you worked on that zone that has such a sort of dark, almost gothic horror type theme, I think Tirisfal Glades and Deadweed Pass are somewhat similar. Was there ever any desire or talk from you during development to do more zones like that? I mean, I guess basically what I'm saying is I want World of Dark Souls. You know what I mean? Like, I love that dark kind of tone. Was there ever going to be any more?
I mean, there already are. Like you said, like Tirisfal is kind of like that. I did Silverpine. Silverpine's also.
Love Silverpine. Yep.
Pretty dark. The other thing also, I don't know if you were involved in the alphas or the betas back then, but yeah, Darkshire was a lot darker at one point.
Yes, that's right.
Like it was really dark. And I remember I got mad because I like logged in one day, like opened the zone up, and I was like, what the hell happened to the lights?
Yeah, well, that's one thing I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned that you actually fought back against that change. What did you mean by that? How far did you take it with management?
I argued with them. I was like, hey, it doesn't look nearly as cool. You're really ruining it. It's like, what are you guys thinking? And, their response was, well, it's too dark and people are having problems navigating. And it was true, but it wasn't. Cause, we do a lot of self-illumination stuff, like all the monsters and stuff are self-illuminated, meaning that they're not getting their lighting from the light of the zone. The mobs themselves are casting their own lights.
Right.
And so, they popped out. But it was more for like road markers and, quest items and things. Cause at the time we didn't have like the sparkly glow on a quest item. So, it was a lot harder for players to find specific things that they were looking for when it was really dark like that. But at the same time, it was one of the reasons, like, so a lot of times you come up with, like internal rules as a level designer for things that you're going to use throughout your level. And Duskwood was one of the first ones that I established this on, mainly because it was the first zone I actually did. But anytime you see torches, in Duskwood, they always lead to a POI. Every single one of them. And I did that because it was so dark. And it was like, okay, this is a marker for players to understand that when they see a torch and there's a little path or something, even if it's not really much of a path, but something, if there's a torch and then another torch, that's going to lead them to something interesting.
Okay.
But yeah, like just the darkness of it. It was really dark. And in hindsight now I look back and I go, yeah, it was too dark. But it was just so cool because of that. You had the bushes with the glowing eyes that would blink and stuff. And those just popped way more in that really dark light. And, Stitches looked even cooler because he was terrifying. So there was a lot of stuff that kind of got lost there, but I think they made the right call.
Well, when you say they, appreciating that it was a long time ago, do you remember who specifically you were voicing this sort of argument for the darkness to?
I know Shane was one of them, Shane DeBerry, who was the producer, one of the producers. I know Alan Adham was involved, and I think it may have been Kevin and Eric Dodds.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. I remember arguing for a while. It wasn't like this big, long, protracted thing. It was just like, I think you guys are wrong, and you're killing the zone, and blah blah blah. But and part of it, to be perfectly honest, is like, they were messing with my baby. So
fair enough.
Don't mess with my stuff, man.
Now, we move on to talk about, obviously one of the biggest questions that people always want to know about is things that hit the cutting room floor for vanilla. Now, I've gone through this with John. You addressed it in the AMA, but I just wanted to extrapolate on one particular point that you made. Now, you were asked by user XosDK, what were your biggest regrets amongst things that were left on the cutting room floor? And you responded, the Emerald Dream. So you mentioned in your response a little bit that it was Metzen's baby, and he didn't really know what he wanted to do with it at the time. And that's basically why the Emerald Dream never really went far into development and was ultimately cut. But my question for you is, what was it about the Emerald Dream, or the potential of the Emerald Dream, that made you want it so badly?
It was completely different than anything we had done thus far. I remember talking with Gary Plattner, who he worked very, very closely with all the exterior level designers. Gary was an environment artist he did, like, if you see a ground texture in WoW, he did 99.9% of them. And by the way, I did the other 0.1% because I was still trying to figure out what else I want to do besides just this at Blizzard. So I was dabbling here and there, but it wasn't just that. Like Gary, he would work with the other environment artists. He'd get, say, the first mock-up of trees and bushes for a zone, and then he'd make all the textures for it, and he'd do the lighting, and he'd mock up this little scene of like how everything works together, right? Mm-hmm. And then he'd hand that off to us, and then we would run with it. And so, he was completely pivotal to everything that we did. And I remember when we got to the Emerald Dream, it was like, just nuts. Like, we got this, color study, as we call them, the color studies were basically our concept, drawings that we had, but they were full color. Mm-hmm. Most concepts that you get in game development are just a sketch on a piece of paper with a pencil. But these were full color. And that was, then given to Gary, and then he can do the lighting, he can do the textures, the, modelers can start throwing together whatever assets they need, just to start it off, and the color study had all these like swirly mounds and stuff. You see it now in Legion and whatnot. Now that they've actually done the Emerald Dream, it's basically a lot like what we were doing back then, like that original color study was. Mm. In fact, I think it's in the original art of World of Warcraft, that particular picture. But we were trying to recapture that, or capture it, not recapture it. But yeah, Gary did a bunch of stuff. We were talking about it. It was like, but the one thing that was so different about it was that it didn't have zone borders. Everything we did had mountains or a river, something. And the Emerald Dream didn't. It was just a dream. And so we were trying to figure out, like, what can we do to stop it's got to be finite, right? Like, I can't make a zone the size of Eastern Kingdoms to call it the Emerald Dream. It's got to stop at some point. We didn't want to surround it with water. That didn't make any sense. And so we were talking about doing there's a heavy fog layer that surrounds the edges of it. And as you would walk into the fog, eventually it would go, from kind of a translucent fog to a fully opaque, you can't see through it fog. At which point I would have invisible blockers out there. And if you hit one of those blockers, it would literally just flip your character 180. So if you're just holding down the run forward key or whatever, auto run, if you hit one of these things, it would just flip you around 180 and you'd start running right back out of the fog from where you came in. Cause that was our trick to make it seem like, oh, it's a dream and you can't leave the dream. But after talking with the programmers, they're like, that's not going to work. But yeah, it was so crazy. Everything else, yes, it's fantasy, but everything else was grounded in some type of reality. Except for the Emerald Dream. It was not. It was just out there. And it was awesome. I wish we had time to do it, but like John had stated many times, we really kind of overdid how much we needed to do. Like, we really overthought it. We were like, oh, we're going to need all this content. And near the end, it came down to okay, we've got way too much stuff as it is. We got to stop. And the dream was my last scheduled zone to work on. And in fact, I actually went and talked to Rob Pardo about it and was like, I'm not going to have time to finish it. We either need to cut it or we need to start giving all my bugs and changes that are on my plate now until ship to somebody else. Cause I can't do both. I can't, do all this stuff. And Rob really, he kind of sighed and was like, and I think that's because a lot of people were coming to him at that point saying, we need to cut. We need to stop building stuff. This is probably 9 months to a year before ship, when that started happening. It was just because at that point we were in full open beta and, everybody on the team had at least 200-300 bugs assigned to them. So yeah, it wasn't going to be this easy chore of creating new content and still fixing bugs and, getting everything ship shape. So
You mentioned influences, and you said despite the fact that obviously it's fantasy, some of it is based in reality. And it's something that comes up when we talk to level designers, be it exterior or interior. And John talked about, some of the caves that he's visited and places in real life that he's seen on his travels that influenced some of the work that he did. So I'm going to throw a similar question out to you. And this one actually comes from a listener of the show, listener Techno Deep, who says this. Bo, what Earth locations were big inspirations for some of the zones in Azeroth? Are there any interesting stories of how some of the zone concepts came to be? When I visited Brace Canyon National Park, I just couldn't stop remembering those hours I spent in Thousand Needles. I got the same feeling at Black Rock City at Burning Man with the shimmering flats, especially considering how many mechanical vehicles and devices there were, which called back to the goblins and the gnomes on the flats. I keep seeing callbacks to the amazing world that you guys created in real life. Thank you for the amazing job that you all did with Azeroth. So, Bo, what can you tell us about any real world inspirations?
So the very first one. So as you mentioned when at the beginning you were talking about the zones that I created, and there's that little blurb at the end that says, and I helped with other zones. Mm-hmm. And that's true for everybody. But one of the zones I was originally tasked with that I didn't actually complete, was the Badlands. And I started working on the Badlands probably, 6 months after Duskwood. And by the way, Duskwood pretty much was a work in progress the entire project. It was one of these. It was that was the case for all of our first zones, which is one of the reasons why Elwyn, Duskwood, Westfall, and Red Ridge are as polished as they are, is because we kept going back. Like we'd have downtime, we'd go back to our first zones and mess with them because we'd learned a bunch of tricks and whatnot. So anyways, so Badlands was, I think, the second one I took on, or maybe the third. I can't remember. But it was definitely, again, Gary had given me, the lighting, had given me, the textures, and we had a few art assets, like some dead trees and scraggly bushes and stuff. And I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the color study, and I'm like, okay, this looks kind of like, I don't know, like Utah, maybe? I'm not sure. So I just started Googling stuff, trying to find pictures of stuff that kind of captured that look. My first thought obviously was, the Grand Canyon, but the Grand Canyon's a canyon. It's not big stone, mountains everywhere. But there was this one particular place, that I had found, and it's actually called the Badlands, and it's in Utah. I think it might actually be like, Nevada, Northern Nevada. I'm not sure. But anyways, there was this very specific looking rock mountain thing. I can't remember the name of the horde town in Badlands, like Kargath or something like that. Or I play Alliance, so I'm bad with horde names.
Yeah, I'd have to. It's been a long time since I've thought of it. I'll quickly look it up while you're talking.
But the horde town in Badlands is situated around the rock formation that I built. And it's based off of this particular one. It doesn't have a name. It's just a very iconic looking rock mountain thing, from the Badlands.
Yeah, it's Kargath.
Kargath. Okay. Yeah. And I tried to model it as best as I could, and I got pretty close with it. Did a pretty decent job, at least with the silhouette. And then, my good friend Mark Downey, he took over the Badlands later and fleshed it out, made it look a lot better, because that was, an early attempt. But he didn't really mess with that. Like, all he did was kind of retexture it a little bit, and mess with the base of it. So that definitely came from a real world location. Trying to think, a lot of the stuff that we did, we would take little bits and pieces, we would see something, and, kind of run with it. One of the things I definitely remembered, and this isn't specifically this zone had this thing. It was a lot more of, along the lines of, I'd be driving in a car, as a passenger, and just kind of staring out the window, and I would see an interesting, terrain, feature, on a mountain or a hill or something, and then wonder to myself, can I do that? Can I recreate that? And after talking with the other level designers after a while, oh yeah, we were all doing that at the time. We're taking inspiration from anything we possibly could. But the only one that I really, really tried to capture was that one. And I know there's others. I'm just kind of blanking on them. Loch Madon, I looked up a lot of Scottish locks and stuff, but man, they're really boring. So I didn't really go that route, because it was no, these aren't going to fly. So, yeah, I'm sure I'll think of one or two after this.
No problems. If you think of anything else while we're going, yell out. But yes, I'll put this one to you. Now, this is again coming off of a quote that you had in the AMA, and you said the following. And you were talking about endgame rating, and you said, I would say it's the ease of the level curve and the emphasis on endgame content. When we built Vanilla, endgame wasn't thought about much other than, yeah, we'll have raids at some point. We didn't really have any concrete idea of what the endgame would be. Then Jeff Kaplan got hired and he started digging into it. And to be honest, it was kind of late in development by that point. Endgame was not an emphasis through the majority of vanilla development. Once we shipped and raids started coming online, by the time BC came along, the idea of true endgame content had formed. So My follow-up question from that quote of yours is this. We've heard from, obviously, yourself here that raiding was not much of an emphasis throughout much of Vanilla's development lifecycle. John Stats told us that PvP wasn't even particularly wanted for much of the dev time either. And also, obviously, a lot of people know that the questing system was or quests were bolstered late when you realized over at Blizzard that there weren't really enough quests in the game or content, and the game was perhaps a bit too grindy. So, with no quests, no PvP, and no raids through much of the development cycle, what the heck was WoW going to be?
WoW was going to be EverQuest in WoW, in Warcraft, right? And I'll correct you on one thing,
okay.
Which is the quest thing, right? Yeah, originally that was totally so the quest thing didn't come on late. That came on actually kind of early. And what happened was, yes, the original plan was really to just kind of model EverQuest, and EverQuest was just grinding mobs. Like, in fact, it had the worst name for what it was. Cause like when I played EverQuest back then, there were, I think, like a grand total of 6 quests. Like, that is not EverQuest. That was like, what? It was just a lot of running around and just killing mobs over and over and over again and grinding your level up. And, you know, they had factions and stuff too, but yeah, there weren't quests, there were all that stuff. And kind of early on, I want to say it was maybe our second Friends and Family Alpha that we did, that we kind of realized, like, wow, the quests are really fun. And they're really driving the game, and they're driving the gameplay. And I remember Alan coming back, after, you know, a certain amount of time and going, we're going to push that. Like, that's going to be an emphasis, is the quests, because everyone really likes them. And, you know, they give you something to do. And yeah, there is still going to be some grinding and whatnot. And, you know, if you played vanilla, there was definitely grinding. When I got my first character to 60, the last 2 levels was just pure grind. There were no quests for me to complete. I didn't have anything to do other than just grind crap. And that's what I did. And I hit 60. But that was true for a lot of it. So before then, yeah, I mean, we definitely had the PvP, component. We had people that really wanted PvP, you know, and again, like I said, like we knew we were going to do raids. But the thing is even then there was a very small subset of Blizzard employees that did raids in EverQuest. So we didn't really know, like, I didn't really know what a raid was. Like, I kind of did, you know, it was like, oh, it's just a really big dungeon, right? But how do they work and what's part of that, all that, I didn't know. I'd never done one. I watched, a video of someone, doing one, and in EverQuest, the graphics were so intense for the computers at the time that, like, when they did raids, everybody just stared at the floor.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very boring video. You know, it was just all text basically. It's like they might as well be playing in mud. So I was like, okay, that doesn't look fun at all, you know, and I kept being assured, oh, no, that's not going to happen in our game. We're going to make sure you can look around and see everything. But yeah, we really didn't know. Even with dungeons, like just the first instances, like I remember the huge argument about instancing in the first place. And that really was a huge argument. That was here's a team meeting. What do you guys think of, you know, how should we do dungeons type of thing? And everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people were completely like on board with just doing it like EverQuest, which is there's just a open dungeon. And, you know, just think of, any instance right now in WoW, but there's no instance portal, right? It's just like a regular cave with all the bosses in there and stuff. And first come, first serve. That was the initial kind of idea that we kind of left that meeting with. It was a big team meeting. And then like a week later, we had another one. I don't remember who proposed the instance idea in the first place, but that went from what was probably scheduled as a 20 to 30-minute meeting into like 3 or 4 hours of arguing. There were probably about 40 people on the team at that point, and holy mother of pearl, it just wouldn't stop.
Do you remember the sort of the different factions in that argument? Who was pro what? And when you say it turned into an argument, please get into it. Was it the Anchorman argument with javelins being thrown? What was happening?
I don't want to name names because I can't remember them and I don't want to misattribute things. I know Roman Kenny, who's one of the artists there, one of the character artists. He was very vocal, but I can't remember what side he was on. I think he was anti-instance, but I don't want to say that because I don't want to be wrong about that. But, but Roman, he was a huge EverQuest player, like huge. Like, I mean, I remember him just strolling into the office one morning, late because he'd stayed up way too late playing EQ and was just like, guess who's a level 55 Death Knight? Like just swinging his dick around. Like, oh, we got a badass over here. So, but I'm pretty sure he was totally against the idea because he was huge into EQ. Like the guys that were huge into EQ were against the idea, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And the rest of us that didn't really know any better were like, well, that sounds more fair. Cause I had run into it in EQ. I didn't play a ton of EQ, but I played enough and I did run into the situation. I don't know if you ever played EverQuest.
No, I created an account once and played for about sort of 30 minutes and then never touched it again. Okay.
Yeah, like guilds would take over dungeons and EverQuest had, player collision, right? And some of their player models that you can make, like the trolls and the ogres and stuff, were gigantic. They were these huge player models. And so a guild would literally lock out a dungeon by taking a couple of trolls and sticking them at the entrance.
Yeah.
And only letting guildmates through. And then nobody else could come through. And it was like, that sucks. I ran into that a couple of times. You just walk up and it's like, you can't attack them because they're your own faction, but you can't get through either.
I'm picturing like a velvet rope outside an EverQuest cave with the bouncers out the front.
It was exactly like that. And if you did somehow sneak through, they would train a bunch of mobs onto you. That was another thing that we tried to solve in WoW was the trained mobs. Cause in EverQuest, mobs would chase you indefinitely. There was no leash. The only way to outrun a mob was to run to a zone border and go through it. At which point they wouldn't go back to where they came from. They just stand where they lost you and then start looking for aggro targets. So that was a huge thing in EQ. And that's why in WoW, if you do /train as an emote, your character will do the choo-choo thing and pump their fist. Cause that people would start, like, you'd see that in chat in EQ, like train, and you just instantly start looking around like, holy crap, where is it?
Yeah.
You see some guy run by with like 50 guys on him and it's like, oh God. And you have to run away. And a lot of times, like if you're close to the zone border, it's like now you're joining in. You got to run for the zone border too, because you're going to die if you don't. So they would do that to him if they did sneak in. So.
You mentioned Roman, and he's a name that it comes up both in John's book and in my chat with him. I think Roman is still at the company. Is that right?
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah. So he sounds like quite the character. I'd love to get him one day.
He's awesome. He loves karaoke and does he's a
kindred spirit. I love karaoke.
Yeah, he's a gentleman scholar. But yeah, he not only does he do karaoke, but he does karaoke contests and stuff. And enters those. And again, no offense, Roman, but he doesn't have the best singing voice. But you know what he's got? He's got chutzpah.
Yeah.
And he's got charisma. Yeah. And he has stage presence. And he just takes over. And he sells it and it's awesome. And again, sorry, Metzen, much better singer than Roman.
Oh, shots fired. All right. I'll have to try and get this
karaoke with both of them. And Sammy too. Sammy's got a great voice also.
Okay. Was karaoke something that happened around the Blizzard offices often?
It went on for a little while. For Roman, it's like, it was often. For the rest of us, it was, like, for me, it was more like once every month or so, maybe. There was a bar in Irvine we go to. It was Irish. I want to say it was like Patty's or something, but I can't remember the name. And that's obviously either completely right or way off. And
I would guess it's probably right.
But we'd go there. I didn't go that often. My son was born like maybe a year after I started working there, and that just killed everything as far as me leaving the house for any reason. So, but yeah, that was fun. The Christmas parties, stuff like that. We would always do karaoke and
we talk about things like, I think, Alex mentioned yesterday I'm pretty sure it was Alex yesterday in my chat with him, who said that, much like regular business, he said the real ideas didn't get formed in the meetings. They got formed in the lunchroom, I think he said. And, people talking off the cuff is when the true formative concepts of WoW would come to fruition. So when you talk about, all of you geeking out together, shooting the shit and having social lives and maybe going out and having a drink together, would you talk shop? What can you remember? I mean, I know, again, it was a very long time ago. Did anyone blurt out some amazing idea while shit-faced?
I can guarantee you that, but if I can remember it, I don't. Because I was shit-faced. I mean, a lot of stuff happened, and this is true just throughout my entire 20-year career now. Like, a lot of things actually just get decided on, like, cigarette breaks, lunch, after hours activities or whatever, because you're just kind of talking and, it never stops. I mean, that, like, if you go look at any job opening for any game company, and this includes Blizzard, one of the things that's always listed, there's, it's always at the bottom, must be passionate about games, right? And that's absolutely true. You have to be passionate. You have to love it. You want to be thinking about it all the time. And most people that work in the industry are like that. And so, yeah, like, you can't help it. Like, you're just out with your buddies doing whatever. And for whatever reason, somebody, the light bulb goes off and they're like, holy shit, what about this? And and then it just starts into this like hour-long conversation about that thing. And then the next day you go into work, write it down, propose it. And sometimes, like, especially early on with WoW, a lot of stuff, there was no like approval process or anything. It was just like, just do it, just put it in and see what it's like. Cause we had a little bit of time to play around there. And that's how you got some of the funnier things that happen, at least with us, like with the exterior level designers and stuff. Like Matt Sanders he was the first one to kind of really understand the full implication of what we were doing. Which is why he became the first lead of the level designers. So for instance, when we put in our first flight pass, cause again, that, like, we knew those were coming at some point when we started making the zones, but they weren't implemented. We didn't have the tech for them yet. And then they started getting implemented, and it was like, holy shit, they're flying over crap that we didn't like finish. It's just untextured terrain with no trees or anything. It's like, oh my God, we got to do something here. So Matt started the trend of doing stuff like that. And one of the things that he had done between Ironforge and Manethil Harbor is he had put like a little crashed gyrocopter thing and a dwarf model and then had written on the white snow in a yellow texture, help. And that got removed before we launched, but, and everyone was very sad to see it go because it's like, come on, he peed in the snow. It's all he could do.
Yeah, it's a shame. Given some things that I think made the cut later on with that Blizzard sense of humor, it's a bit funny to see that taken out.
Yeah, well, it was just kind of, it was obviously it was yellow, and that started, that was a little too kind of close to at least obscenity or the idea that, there was oh my God, a penis involved.
Right. Well, it's better than it being,
So,
it was better than it being in brown.
true. That would have, he'd have been up there for a while then. What was he eating?
Well, look, you talk about, some of the ideas that get tossed around in cigarette breaks and things like that. And one of them that you mentioned, maybe this was tossed out in a cigarette break. I don't know. You said in the AMA that I remember the idea, being jokingly tossed around, about, flying mounts. And you said the stares that they that person got from the exterior level designers would have killed lesser men. So
yep.
My follow-up question is really just talk a bit about that moment and how far did the talk go, or were they really just sort of off the cuff whispers or mentions about flying mounts in the meal rooms or during a cigarette break?
Yeah, it was usually a situation of either someone that hadn't so at some point somebody early on mentioned the idea, like that would be cool, right? It was after we got the flight pass put in, right? Because now we're flying. And it's like, oh, this is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention the fact that we could cheat at this point. And one of the cheats was just /fly. And now you could just fly. And, someone early on kind of mentioned like how cool would it be to fly? And it was like, and at that point, we only had like a couple of zones done. So the exterior level design was like, yeah, that would be awesome. And then, fast forward 6 months or so, we're kind of, reality started to set in on what that would take. And someone kind of mentions it. And like every time it got mentioned, it was always either someone that wasn't involved the last time or a new employee would just kind of off the cuff, yeah, it would be cool if we could fly. And we would all be like, yeah, that would be cool. That's never going to happen. Get out of my office. Like, I hate you. Because yeah, it was so hard as it was just getting what we were doing completed. And, if you can do it now, you can fly around Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, but there are several sections. If you fly over them, there's like between, say, like, the Badlands, like over to Syrian Gorge or into Loch Madon, there's a zone's worth of section of mountains up there. That are there's nothing there.
Yep.
And that's how it was, except back then there was literally nothing there. And that's why, like, when I saw in Cataclysm that they were going to allow flying mounts there, I was like, holy crap. That's what they've been doing for like the last year. Like there've been like 3 or 4 guys that their job has been just finishing all the crap that we didn't finish. Because it was an amazing amount of work to get that done. And yeah, there was no way we had time for that. And, and what was worse was like they literally were hiring right up to the end. Like when I joined the team, we were employees, the 4 of us, numbers 29, 30, 31, and 32. And we always fought about who was what number there. But, by the time I left, we were at like 113 or something, and they were still hiring. So yeah, even late in the project, we'd get some new programmer or something coming in and be like, oh, it would be awesome if we started flying. And yeah, that's when it's like, we just kind of, yeah, you want to just shank a bitch.
Now, you talked about influences and real life influences, and you mentioned something else during the AMA. We also talked about, things like, other game influences, and you mentioned EverQuest being something that was high in the mind of some of the designers at the time and the devs. And, it's funny, you mentioned the sort of relatively unfortunate name of EverQuest in hindsight when we think that there weren't that many quests at all in the game. And I never really thought about it before. It actually calls me straight to, I'm a huge Simpsons fan which a lot of the listeners know. And it calls me straight back to that Lionel Hutz line where he says, Mr. Simpson, this is the greatest case of false advertising since my case against the never ending story. And EverQuest really would fall in that category. But outside of gaming influences, real life influences, there are other sort of pop cultural influences. And you talked about the fact that The Lord of the Rings was a huge influence on the designers. And you said that all of you, also at one point as a studio, you went to go and see on top of that, the Dungeons and Dragons movie, one year, and you were terrified that, the Fellowship of the Ring was going to be like that horrible Dungeons and Dragons movie. But in terms of loving Lord of the Rings, are there any zones that you can point to or any particular locations where you go, yeah, I was kind of doing a Lord of the Rings thing there?
So it wasn't me. It was Metzen. And it sucks because it failed. And it was just, we were still early. We didn't really know what we were lining up. Everything's weren't correct. But in Loch Madon, there's a section in Loch Madon. It's like southwestern corner of it that leads to Syrian Gorge. There's a giant tunnel that leads to Syrian Gorge. And there's also right there is where one of the two paths come down from Dún Moro. And there's these two giant dwarven statues, flanking the road. And that was totally the Argonath Argonath from Lord of the Rings. That was Metzen, Metzen's like, this is going to be the Argonath. It's going to be awesome. And it was cool, except for the fact that there was like no reveal for it. And it was, a level 10 zone. Wasn't super spectacular. And it's just like in this little kind of corner of the zone that you never go to, right? Like, it's like you come down from Dún Moro, and if you happen to take that one path, because there's two paths down from Dún Moro, you have to take that one, you come out like right at the base of it, and you can't even see them. So it was a total swing and a miss there. And that was, part of that was also us trying to figure out zone transitions. Like that was another big blunder early on, was that like we knew that one zone would transition to the other, but there was no communication between the level designers as to when and where that would happen. And so they just kind of got like forced in at the last second for several of them, on the early zones. We got a lot better at that later on. But early on, like that, Dún Moro to Loch Madon, that was a terrible one, just because we didn't know what the hell we were doing yet. I think they nailed it in Mists of Pandaria in Vale of Eternal Blossoms. They got the two giant panda statues that are doing the same thing. And those are awesome. Mine was a big fat failure. But yeah, you can fly there now at least. Yeah, we tried. We gave it our go. Let's see, Mark Downey completely with, is it Syrian Gorge? Yeah, I think it's Syrian Gorge. There's giant like pit dug out in the middle of the zone with water wheels and pulleys all over the place, and that's totally Isengard. He talked about that over and over again as he was building it. Was begging like either Stats or one of the other interior guys to build him some cool interiors to go with it, which they ended up doing. So that was completely like, that one's 100% from Lord of the Rings, and Mark nailed it. So those are the two off the top of my head that I know for a fact came directly from there.
Okay. Well, you made this comment on the AMA as well, where you said you pretty much played the earliest designs of Hunter if you played at launch. Hunters were the last class added, and they barely made it in. So my follow-up question would be, how close was it? What was going on? Was it mayhem at HQ when you were wondering whether or not you should put Hunters in vanilla?
No, I think that they were in, like, they were the last class added in the beta, in the open beta. When we went to open beta, Hunter wasn't available when we started it. I'm pretty sure that was true of another class too. I can't remember which one it would be. But that was probably true of another class also. Or if not, another class wasn't available, it had just been implemented right before we went to open beta. But Hunter wasn't even available at first. In fact, I didn't even touch the Hunter until release. That was the first time I made a Hunter. I'd been looking forward to it for so long. So yeah, I think that a lot of that just, there was so much work to do. And, you know, those guys, the class guys were getting slammed with a ton of feedback from the betas and trying to balance everything, trying to keep everything fun. And at the same time, still make new classes, right? You should ask Kevin this, next when you have him on, cause he's a lot closer to it than I was.
Yep.
But yeah, the Hunters just, like I'm not going to say they barely made it in cause they were promised and we weren't going to break a promise, right? Like we knew they were coming. It was just a matter of when. You know, and I played Hunters. My main for the longest time was a Hunter. And the first character I made, my first level 60, my first level 70. And I loved him, but yeah, it was, I guarantee you people will reply that if they played Hunter from vanilla from day one, they know the struggle. It was a hard class to play. You were fighting with rogues over gear because they didn't wear mail at the time. They wore leather only. And, you'd go into Upper Blackrock and, you know, some awesome leather would drop from a set piece or something. And you'd have to fight with the rogues to get a piece. Cause back then it was always like, you know, they would decide who got to roll on things because they didn't have the roll system that they have now for loot. Like
what did they have?
Just nothing.
Oh.
It was just
a battle royale for loot.
Yeah, you could just grab shit. Ninja looter was a term. And a ninja looter was somebody that would just run up and just grab everything off a mob and then like bail. You know. So, but generally that wasn't the case. You'd have, you know, you had a community and people were cool. And so you would all, you know, talk and decide who got what or who got to roll on things. And, you know, I don't even know. I'm sure it's still in the game, but I haven't used it in a decade. But you can do /roll and then number, and it's going to roll a random number between those, you know, whatever you put in, like 1 to 100. That's what it would do. Roll 100. Okay.
Well, now they've got the personal
1.
Loot system, so everyone gets something.
Yeah. But yeah, that's how you did it. And I remember like, God, it was such a pain in the ass. Like, you know, and with weapons too. Like, you know, Hunters could dual wield. So it's like, oh, I want a dagger. I want that dagger. It's got +2 agility. And the rogues are like pissed off because that's not going to help you use a bow or a gun. It's like, yeah, but it's helping my stats. So it's good for me. Even though I'm not hitting people with this shit, it's still helping my stats. Yeah. I'm sure you'll get replies to that. Just the pain of the Hunters early on. Cause they didn't have their own place yet. They were like, you know, they were still trying to figure them out and they were in between. And, you know, I love the Hunter though. That's
fair enough.
An awesome class.
In terms of classes that you loved, and I'll be peppering Kevin Jordan with these kinds of class-based questions after this interview. I'm speaking with him, but you made a comment again just in regards to things that you either liked or didn't like. So from a personal perspective, you talked about you said several classes were scrapped early. The one big one that broke my heart was the Runemaster. At that point, all of the classes were just paper designs, so we never got to play with them. So my question is, what do you remember of what was in store for those classes that were scrapped, such as the Runemaster, and why did it particularly break your heart not to have the Runemaster put in?
So I was always a big, like Norse mythology fan, and the Runemaster is definitely, you know, that's totally hearkening to Norse mythology. Like they were big on runes and that whole thing. In fact, I remember having a conversation with Kevin in his office. He shared an office with Eric Dodds, and you know, I went in there actually to talk to Eric, but ended up. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember if Eric or Kevin mentioned the Runemaster to me because they were still like, again, it was all on paper, just, coming up with things. And as soon as I heard that like, man, I sat next to Kevin for like an hour, just kind of grilling him about it and like, just, trying to come up with cool shit for it. Cause it was completely just a concept. It was, for all intents and purposes, at that point, kind of just a name. Like Kevin had done a bunch of preliminary work on it and coming up with some ideas, but, but it was a thing. It was, like the inscription, trade skill. I'm not going to say that was taken from the Runemaster. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I have no, but it was very similar to the stuff that Kevin and I were talking about. And it was mostly Kevin telling me about his ideas and me going, oh, that would be cool. Also, if we did blah or whatever. But it didn't really go much further than that. But it was basically, it was a magic class user of some type, but his power came from the runes and like, what was he going to do with the runes? A big, cycle of books that I had read by, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman was the Deathgate cycle. And one of the characters in there, there was like these two ruling class of like magic user god type characters, the good guys and the bad guys. And the bad guys, it was all rune magic, and they would put tattoos on their bodies all over. And those tattoos then were infused with magic and would allow them to do certain things. And like, as they used a specific type of magic, those runes on their body would glow. I was talking about stuff like that, and, Kevin was digging it, or he was just humoring me. I don't know. He seemed like he was. But you can ask him about that. But like, yeah, it was just like, just that whole idea of that type of character coming to life just was like, oh, that's so awesome. I totally want to play that character. And then there was that heartbreaking moment where it was like, okay, we're going to have 9 classes. And by the way, that was a big, huge thing too. We're going to have 9 classes and 6 races. What? Oh my God, the argument. That lasted forever.
In terms of being too much or too little?
Way too little. Because EverQuest had like 15 or 16 classes and 20 races, and we got to compete with them, and we're going to just fail because we're not going to compete with them, and just all this stuff. And it was like, whoa. Like, I didn't care that much. Like, I wanted more classes. I didn't care about the extra races. But some people just totally wanted both. Some people just wanted a ton of races, didn't care about the classes. And, yeah, that was a big thing. But, I think it worked out. The one thing I never agreed with was the shaman versus paladin thing. Never got that. I mean, I got it lore wise. I just didn't get it gameplay wise. I felt it was kind of sucky because
thought everyone should have had access to everything.
Yeah. What they finally did in Burning Crusade, but, and I was really happy when that came out, and I was like, yay, now I can be Alliance and play a shaman. Cool.
Any other whispers or mentions of classes that were thought of? I mean, people often talk about, from the box art of the game, and we've obviously had it discussed relatively recently as well, that demon hunters were probably a much earlier thought, that they were a much earlier thought than what we eventually got. Anything else outside of the demon hunter that was kind of played around with?
I know the Death Knight was around.
Yep.
I know there was more than one simple mage or block class. Like, there were several different casters. I can't give you the names. Again, this is totally Kevin territory.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask him, I think the Necromancer was one of them that people talk about as well.
That's right. Yeah, the Necromancer was one. There were several casters, like Clothwearers. And yeah, just a lot of stuff. Like, again, I know Kevin answered that in his AMA, talking about what they ended up with was trying to kind of please everybody by just kind of giving you archetypes. And then the talent system would allow you to kind of
choose your own
focus
adventure.
type of thing. And that's what we did end up with. And, and it worked. It just, I think it wasn't explicit enough. And I think a lot of people kind of missed that here and there. But also a lot of it was, it wasn't, what do you call it? The gear and the look, right? So there's another thing I'll mention too. Is, Dan Moore, who I know that John talks about at one point, who was one of the 3D artists that we had. That, you know, as John put it, and this is exactly what Dan did. Dan made all the little things in the game. So like, you know, if you see a stool, Dan made the stool. Like a wheelbarrow, Dan made the wheelbarrow. You know, he wasn't doing all the big, giant, like awesome looking, you know, props. He didn't do the dam for Loch Madon or that. But he did he filled the world with everything else. A coil of rope? Cool. Thanks, Dan. I remember talking with him at one point, cause he was on the project from the beginning. I wasn't. Like, I came in, they'd been working on it probably for a year and a half by the time they hired us. And he was talking about an early design for the game actually was much closer to like the idea that, it was all faction based, and that was supposed to be the game. You would choose a faction that you wanted to follow, like say the Scarlet Crusade or whatever. And as you leveled up and got gear, you would start looking more and more like a Scarlet Crusader. You'd get gear that was closer looking to them. And eventually you would look like, you know, one of the higher ups of the Scarlet Crusade. Mm-hmm. And the idea was just a ton of different factions, you know, and you would pick between those. This is long before Horde versus Alliance also. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was a really cool idea.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I really kind of wish they'd gone with it, but, you know, obviously they didn't. But it's also similar to Guild Wars, and that's not super surprising.
Right. I'll get us
started. Wow.
I'll get us back on the rails a little bit in terms of your field of expertise, and a very generic question that comes up. I'm not sure if I couldn't spot this one in the AMA. It might well be there, but listener XY13 says this, and it's a bit of a triple header, but it should be simple enough to bang out in one answer. What was your favorite zone that you made? Which do you think came out the best, and which gave you the most? Which was the most challenging?
So my favorite is probably Silver Pine. Mm-hmm. Well, that I did. It's not my favorite.
Yeah.
In the game. Favorite I think I did that was Silver Pine. And the reason for that was just cause it was it had a good flow to it that was nice and easy. Like Duskwood was problematic. I'm not going to say challenging, but it was problematic just because the world tree is right in the middle of the damn zone. And it screwed up the flow. The quest designers, the mob designers did a really good job dealing with that giant nuisance right in the middle of the zone. But it did cause problems. But Silver Pine just a nice linear, you started at point A and you move all the way to point Z throughout the zone, like beginning to end. And it just flowed really well. It looked good. It was similar in style to Duskwood, you know, kind of dark and creepy, which I liked. Just, you know, it felt good. Plus it, like, you know, I don't know. I liked doing, the Horde zones. I don't know why. I didn't get to do a ton of them, but I did some, and I liked doing them. And then what was the second one?
So what was the most challenging one? Oh, sorry, no, before we get there, how about this? Which do you think turned out the best, but wasn't necessarily a favorite?
Duskwood.
Okay. And
Duskwood definitely.
And in terms of that, flowing on from that, what was the most challenging zone to work on that you did?
That was Shimmering Flats, and it's Thousand Needles / Shimmering Flats. People don't realize it, but that was just one zone. I was given it, so when we went to do the zones, one of the first things we did was, kind of early on, is we did what was called a height map import. A height map in game development is a black and white image, with shades of gray in between, right? White on the image is the highest point something can be, and black is the lowest point something can be. Back then, I think we were limited to like 16-bit texture resolution, maybe 8, which means that it's not granular at all. because we had looked at doing height map imports to do things before. But the idea was basically, I think it was Gary Plattner again, who drew out the zones as a height map, just black and white image, right? And it was just like the border of the zone.
Mm-hmm.
And then we took that whole thing and we imported it into the editor, and boom, now we had like this kind of basic rough idea of where the zone borders were for everything. And it was just like literally a sheer cliff that was like 1,000 feet tall or something, right? That but easily cut out your zone that you were going to work on. And I remember getting to Shimmering Flats and Thousand Needles, which was one zone. And I was like, this is 2 zones. Like, what the hell are you guys thinking? This isn't a zone. This is 2 zones, and not only is it 2 zones, but it's obviously 2 zones because there's 2 separate texture sets that, oh my God. Okay. And they're still like, yeah, you got 6 weeks. Go. Thanks. All right. So that was really hard. Thousand Needles was very challenging at first. I was terrified I couldn't get the look down, but I got it. And then I went with it. But again, it was like Duskwood times 1,000,000 because there's all these needles all over the place that just ruin the flow. It's really hard to navigate. You can't just run through it. It looks cool, just doesn't play real well. Awesome when you can get on top of the needles, like the Grim Totem area, like that stuff's cool. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, get to Shimmering Flats, and it's like, make a salt flat and make it interesting. What? Like, how am I supposed to make it interesting? It's just flat,
Just more salt. Make it salty.
Yeah, exactly. I actually had to go to Metzen and talk to him and be like, look, man, I got to do shit in here like that isn't on the map. Like, I got to start, I'm going to put a crater here, like, something fell from the sky. Cause if I don't, this place is going to suck. Cause literally all he handed me when I got that zone was the racetrack in the middle and the Silithid cave thing. And that was it. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Have you seen the size of this place? Oh my God.
Wow.
So yeah, that one was really hard just because, I had to fill it up with something. And yeah, that one actually, and then I'll say also Durotar was actually very challenging too.
Oh.
But Durotar it wasn't the zone or the flow itself. It was texturing it. I had a real hard time with coming up with something that looked good. And that one actually took me the most time. It took me, we were given 6 weeks per zone, which by the way, nobody hit. But, Durotar took me like 12. Okay. So I went like double on that one. And that was just because I couldn't get the texturing yet. I couldn't get something that looked good. It just, every try, I did like 3 or 4 passes on it, and every try came out just terrible. And then I finally, with maybe a week to go, I hit what it looks like now. I was like, oh, okay, thank God. Replicate that across the zone like crazy. So.
All right. We'll turn to this one from listener Slicktastico, who says this. Bo, can you talk about your approach to zone design and speculate about how it differs from the approaches that seem to have been taken in later versions of the game, particularly the post-Cataclysm versions of the zones that you worked on in vanilla? The zones in Kultiris in the latest expansion, for example, are undeniably beautiful, yet I find that vanilla's zones inspire a much deeper sense of mystery, discovery, and even awe, despite being less graphically impressive and far more sparse. Do you have a theory as to why that is? So perhaps I'll break that down into 2 separate questions. Now, how do you feel about what was done to the zones you worked on in a post-Cataclysm world?
Most of the stuff I'm happy about. To be perfectly honest, Shimmering Flats is way more entertaining now. Mm-hmm. I love Shimmering Flats now. I hated it in vanilla. Like when I got there, playing through it, I was just like, this place sucks. Now, like, I love it. It's like Wind Waker, like Legend of Zelda. You know, you got your boat, you're just zipping around on this lake thing and, you know, dive underneath. And like all my stuff is still there, which is cool, you know. And it looks better because they like updated it and made it look cooler. They destroyed my poor lock. I mean, that kind of hurt. They drained it. Whoever went in though and retextured the bottom of the lock though did an awesome job. That shit looks amazing. But yeah, that was another thing that just completely sucked and blindsided us. I know I mentioned that in the AMA I did with you, that like we had totally forgotten to do the underwater sections. And like, yeah, at one point someone was like, by the way, you gotta like, you know, make underwater the lock.
Yeah, there's shit under the water.
It's like, yeah, it's like, and that's like half the zone. I was like, what? Oh shit. All right. Let me see what I can do. But yeah, that kind of sucked just cause, you know, I put a lot of work into that and all right, I get it, you know, and it's cool now. And it's actually the zone itself is, you know, it flows better cause there's not a giant lake in the middle. Cause that was one of the things, like we really went aesthetic first and design and flow second when we were making the stuff the first time around. And most of it's because, you know, and that, again, I'm not going to disparage Chris here, but it was Metzen's stuff. Like, you know, he had written and drawn up all this stuff and then just handed it to us. And we just, okay, let's just do it. Do what Metzen, you know, said. And no questioning or anything. No like, hey man, there's a big world tree in the middle of the zone that's going to cause a problem, or a big lake or anything like that. It was just like, cool, I'll build it. So, you know, one of the things that Cataclysm really did well is they fixed it design wise. And so, yeah, I mean, everything else, like I love what they did to Desolace, cause yeah, Desolace was painful. And I know Mark Downey is the one that built that zone. I know he struggled with that one for a long time just because it was the Shimmering Flats all over for him. Like, it's like giant desolate zone, but make it interesting. It's like, it's called Desolace. Jesus. So, you know, he did what he could. But we also didn't have the idea back then of, you know, what we call the sub-zone, right? The zone within a zone, like Desolace has now. Like Desolace has sections that are desolate, but there's also like green sections and the lighting changes. And, you know, those are the sub-zones that changes up, and they do that all over the place now in WoW. We just didn't do it back then. We didn't really have the concept of it. And we should have, but you know, again, like we learned lessons for the first couple of years that I was working on the project, and then it was just go time. And, you know, the lessons were still being learned, but there wasn't a lot we could do with them, because we didn't have time to stop and try to flesh things out. We just had to go. So.
And
what was the second part of that question?
The second part was, how do you, I guess to summarize it, how do you feel about the approach that Blizzard takes towards level design now compared to what you did back in the day? And obviously this user points out that they feel that, you know, there was a bit of a sense of mystery and discovery, in terms of the way in which the zones were laid out before. And, they, you know, because it was almost, I guess what they're saying is addition by subtraction. There wasn't as much there. So it felt a bit more mysterious perhaps. So what do you think about what they're doing now versus what you did back in the day?
So it's definitely, and this might upset the question asker, but it's definitely a better approach. Like, to me, the zones play a million times better. And part of it is the quest design. Part of it is the level layout. Part of it is just the general gameplay. All of those things have just gotten better throughout the years. The big thing for me, honestly, is the fact that like when we built WoW, everything was what I call a rubber band quest, right? You get a quest in Goldshire And when you're done, you have to go back to Goldshire to turn it in. But a lot of the times they're sending you almost to Red Ridge to complete the quest. And then you got to go all the way back to Gold. There's all this rubber banding back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Here's a hub and then back and forth, back and forth. Now they don't do that so much. There's a lot more breadcrumbing just with quests and intermediate areas moving you through the zone, you know, in a nice organic fashion, that we just didn't do back then. And that's part of why there was so much of that discovery, is because sometimes the quest didn't take you there. And so you didn't even know. Like there's like plenty of places in vanilla where there were quest lines and stuff, but there were no breadcrumbs to take you to that area. Like you'd stumble upon it at some point and like, oh crap, there's like 3 quest givers here. But there was no way for the player to know to, you know, naturally go to that location without exploration. That's good and bad. You know, from, you know, player perspective, from design and development, I know that their process is very different. Like, as we talked about at the very beginning of this, we were very free to do what we wanted with the zones. That's not the case anymore as far as the way I understand how they do it now. It's a process now. And they actually do, gray boxing, which is an industry term, basically just kind of laying out a level or a zone, really fast, really quick, just putting down gray blocks and crap, to represent trees and houses and whatnot.
Okay.
Just to get, an idea of what it's going to play like before you then take the time to, you know, build it for real. Cause that's time consuming. The gray box, you could do a gray box, you know, for a WoW zone probably in like a week or 2, for the whole thing. And then you could populate it with mobs and quests and leave it like that, you know, and play it that way. And then if things need to be changed, it's easily changed because not a lot of work has gone into it. That's the whole advantage to gray boxing.
Right.
You just have to, as a developer, realize, okay, yeah, that's going to be a tree. Just ignore it for now. Like, pretend that's a tree. And I wish we had done that back then, but we just didn't. Cause that it helps a lot. I mean, here's a great example of it. At one point in Durotar, one of the quest designers came and asked me if I could move a mountain range back 10 feet. And I was like, you want me to move a mountain 10 feet backwards? And I was like, do you need the whole range moved or just like a section for this thing? And he was like, well, I just need it for this one quest, this one portion of the quest, but I think it would look better if the whole thing moved back 10 feet.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, well, first of all, I do have copy and paste, so I can maybe do this for you. However, the smallest I can do is 100 feet.
Right.
I can't do 10 feet. I don't have that kind of fidelity. And are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
Really?
I was going to say, I was surprised you didn't say, first of all, go fuck yourself. And
yeah, I was close to it. I was like, what's that? Especially after he was like, well, I just need this little camp. I just need a little bit more room with it. That's like, all right. First rule of game development. Tell me what you want first, like the intent first. And I'll tell you how we achieve it.
Right.
Like,
there you go.
Don't tell me to move a mountain range back 10 feet so you can have an extra 5 feet for your enemy quest base. Come on, man.
All right. Well, I won't ask you to move any mountains for me, but I will ask you this next question about another comment that you made in the AMA. And this is a relatively long quote of yours, and it's a relatively long answer. So strap in for this one. But you said, I don't recall the Night Elves being considered for Horde, but I can't say for certain this isn't true. As for the Forsaken, well, early on the Horde was definitely considered the evil faction, quote unquote. The Forsaken were going to be the undead player race, though they weren't called Forsaken yet, possibly even part of the Scourge. Metzen was still writing Warcraft 3 at the time, and nothing was solid yet. Once Warcraft 3 was done, it was obvious that players couldn't be Scourge, what with being minions of the Lich King and all, but they were still totally evil evil, obviously. But then there was the epiphany that some people were into playing evil races or factions, whereas a lot more people wanted to play as these quote-unquote evil races, Forsaken not included, but as the good guys, Thralls, Orcs during Warcraft 3, for example. So Metzen needed to come up with something for the undead. We seriously considered dropping them, but every time we looked at concepts in game assets, we balked. Then he announced the Forsaken, and there was much rejoicing. So the question that follows from that anecdote is this, from listener Warchief Gammon, who says this: Bo seemed to be saying here that the Forsaken were specifically created so that they could be the playable undead race in WoW. Can he confirm that this actually means that the whole storyline with Sylvanas and the Forsaken in Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, was written specifically to lead up to these playable undead in World of Warcraft? That this whole idea of a group of undead under Sylvanas' command breaking away from the Scourge was born out of this need to justify this race and would not have existed otherwise? Because to me, the Forsaken always seemed like an incredibly poor fit with the rest of the Horde thematically. So hearing that they were apparently created to join the Horde was rather shocking to me. I always figured the Forsaken was simply born naturally out of the story that was being told in Warcraft 3 and then were forced into the Horde in World of Warcraft because there were only 2 playable factions. So, what would you have to say to that, Bo?
I would say I cannot confirm that 100% because that was Metzen.
Mm-hmm.
So as to whether or not his intent for Frozen Throne and all that stuff was to do that, that's my take on it. I'm pretty positive that that's the case, but again, I don't want to put words into his mouth.
So that's your interpretation, as opposed to there was no mutterings around the office like, let's do this race in Frozen Throne.
There was that moment. Nothing about Frozen Throne, but there was definitely that moment of the Scourge are going to be, undead that broke away from the Lich King for whatever reason. And even then that hadn't been decided, like why they broke away. That was kind of like nebulous at first, like how they broke away. Like why, like, cause they're undead. They have to be, under the Lich King. And like I did say in that quote, like that was a thing. Like I remember talks of, we're going to cut the undead. Like we don't know how to do them and make them look cool. And because there was a lot of concerns about modeling them and texturing them and stuff. Because one of the early designs, and I'm sure Kevin can back this up too, maybe has more detail on it. But there was this idea that like when you started, you would be like basically a fully fleshed human, and as you leveled, you would lose flesh and bones would start appearing, and you become more undead looking the higher level you got. And just tech wise, we were like, I don't know how we're going to do that. And then modeling wise, it was like, holy crap, it's like we're going to have to make 50 different models just for the undead. Like it was a nightmare to even consider. And that was one of the reasons why they were like, yeah, maybe we should just cut this shit, because come on, this is going to be so much work just for this one race. And at the same time, like I said, like Chris still hadn't figured out like what he was going to do, like how they were going to be the undead, like, and again, also at the time, my feeling at least, and I can't verify this, but my feeling was definitely that the Horde were the bad guys. Like we were definitely looking at a black and white game at the time. Good guys versus bad guys. But that was the WoW team. And I do remember a big epiphany for me just as an employee and a fan of the Warcraft series. I'd played all the Warcrafts prior to joining Blizzard. And talking with Sam Waizidier, art director for, the Warcraft team, and like just how much he loved the Horde. And I was like, you like the bad guys? He's like, they're not the bad guys. What's wrong with you? they're the good guys. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And we had this discussion, and like, he was like, no, the Horde are totally the good guys. They're awesome. And, that was like an epiphany for me to realize, holy crap, like some people really identify with the Horde, Sammy is one of them. And okay, I get it. Like, and Metzen was the same way. Like, he never tried to write, like, I'm sure for Warcraft 1, it was probably totally good guys versus bad guys.
Yep.
Cause it was the beginning, and, there was barely a story there, but they were trying. But then, Chris really tried to, even like with StarCraft, like he really did a really good job with the original StarCraft, that no one was really the bad guys. Maybe the Zerg. Okay. The Zerg were totally bad guys, but even then, like, there was, it was more like the Zerg were like just animals. And they're just, following their nature. They're the scorpion, the frog type of situation. So, once that hit though, that like, and that also, by the way, wasn't a huge argument like instances or anything else, but there was definitely at least like an hour-long team discussion about two factions, Alliance versus Horde, which obviously made sense. And people had a hard time arguing against that. But that neither of them were the bad guys. Like, that was really the root of the argument. Was they're both going to be the good guys. Just in their own way. So.
Okay. Yeah. Now, next we got this one from listener Errant Wolf, who says this. Through the Countdown to Classic interview with John Statz, we learned that there were a lot of areas that were, for lack of a better word, abandoned because Blizzard did not want the game to feel too cluttered with content, and they wanted to save other elements for later down the line. Looking at Azshara, Moonglade, Winterspring, and Felwood, we can see that the Timbermaw presence was strong. Yet much of Timbermaw Hold was inaccessible, most notably the large gate in western Azshara. Were zones like the ones listed originally intended to include more Timbermaw story? Was Moonglade always going to be mostly a druid-specific zone? So you worked on Moonglade. What do you know about what was going on there?
Yeah, the lore for that one, that was like, so we were given our list of zones. That was finalized maybe a year after I started. We all touched different zones early on. Like, for instance, I started work on Azshara originally, Badlands. I started work on Burning Steppes. But I never finished any of those zones. I just did stuff, in fact, I think the Badlands, as we talked about earlier, that one, mountain piece is the only thing that was left. And that's the only thing of those early zones that I touched that stayed. Like, nothing I did in Azshara stayed. Nothing I did in, whatever the other one was, stayed. Like, a lot of that shit just got thrown away. Yeah. Well, Moonglade I did, but Moonglade, I saw that on the list, but it was way down the list.
All right.
Like, I had a bunch of crap to do before I got to it. And I kind of had some idea, it's this druid place. It's going to be so awesome. And then I got to doing it, and like, I'm talking with the quest guys, I'm talking with Metzen, and it's like, it's like a class hall, like from Legion. Like, that's what I'm building. But except that concept doesn't exist yet. This is just like a druid only zone. It's not really meant for adventuring, really, but kinda, we want to do some cool stuff here, but we don't really know what, and, and there's not a lot of space for it. Like, okay, let me build this out. So I did. And yeah, like, again, I was super excited long before I got to it. When I got to it, I was disappointed. I was like, there's not a lot of lore here. The only thing that I knew going in beforehand, lore wise, was, it's cool. It's got the barrow dens. That's where Malfurion does his, his hibernating and, traveling to the Emerald Dream. That was it. Like, other than that, there was nothing else to the zone. It was like, okay, this is pretty boring, but okay, I'll just do it because, I mean, yeah. That was probably my most disappointing zone. I like the way it turned out, but again, big freaking lake in the middle for no reason, eating up gameplay area, but there wasn't much to it. As far as the Timbermaw stuff goes, yeah, there was probably a lot going on there. But I don't know. Like, okay. I didn't do the quest stuff. Okay. Yeah.
Well, you might have mentioned the answer to my next question already just then when you talked about sort of disappointments, because I was going to ask you something that you mentioned where you said a lot of the early zone layouts were just bad. It wasn't so much that we were inexperienced, but the whole team was when it came to this. It was all a work in progress and we learned as we went, as you've mentioned several times through this talk. But I was going to ask basically what was the zone that you were most disappointed with, or that you thought was perhaps your, not so great work in the game. But it sounds like we just got that answer.
Well, no, Moonglade was disappointing more for me from just kind of a lore standpoint. Just because it was one of those ones that Metzen knew he wanted, but he hadn't fleshed out. He didn't really know what it was supposed to be or what, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But as far as like, when I talk about like, we didn't know what we were doing, that's I kind of answered that earlier. Like, we didn't have flow down. And the quest designers didn't have concepts of how to handle, zones, like moving through the zones without rubber banding players and whatnot. So, if you play WoW now, like that just doesn't happen. You move through the zones organically and it's fun. And if there is a big obstruction in your way, it's usually placed there on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas back then, not so much. It was placed there because that's how Metzen drew it when he was drawing up a world map. And he wasn't thinking about flow of questing through this area. He was thinking about that looks cool. And this is what I had written about for this area of this, section of the world. So yeah, we didn't know.
Right.
Like we were still learning. We were still trying to figure things out. And, we got better as we went. Like, that's why Kalimdor, for the most part actually flows better overall than Eastern Kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we did that 1 second. So.
Okay. It's funny. I've always enjoyed Eastern Kingdoms a bit more than Kalimdor, but I do see what you're saying.
Yeah. It's just layout and quest design, basically. It got better as we went.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously this is a classic themed podcast, and a lot of my listeners, as they probably realize by now, I do somewhat save the best for last. And now I'm going to take you just for this last act of the chat down the path of discussing classic and what we may be receiving there. And the first question that I wanted to ask you is still, again, based off of something that you said in the AMA. And you mentioned that the first 3 zones that we polished out that contained an instance were Elwyn, Westfall, and Redridge. That was the second Friends and Family Alpha. The first one was Dunmoreau, Lochmadan with no instances. So Westfall, Dead Mines, the Defier storyline all got a lot of love, and then reality set in. So my question is, recently, I'm not sure if you've heard in the last couple of days, but Blizzard has announced that we are going to be getting a demo of Classic at BlizzCon this year, as well as a take-home version for people who buy a virtual ticket. So this was really, really big news for the Classic community. We've obviously been waiting a really long time for Classic, and now we're getting told that we're going to be able to play a portion of the game later this year. So that's fantastic. But they mentioned that we're going to be getting 2 playable zones. They didn't say specifically which ones, but they mentioned the Defias and said they're 2 iconic zones, 1 Horde, 1 Alliance. So obviously people were speculating that it's likely going to be Elwyn and Durotar, or Westfall and the Barrens. So my question is really, would you think that, would you agree that probably that's something we would get, in terms of the fact that you seem to mention that those instances might be a little bit easier to work on? Is that the case or not so much?
So yeah, well, when I did the AMA and I made that comment the first time, someone replied with like, "Oh, there were instances in all those zones," and I had to kind of clarify that. And what I meant was, of the first 3 zones we did, there was a single instance that was and the first instance in the game, which was Dead Mines, and it only was in Westfall, obviously. So I'm. And those zones got a lot of polish. Duskwood was also, on that list of those were the first 4 zones we did. So Josh Kurtz started on Elwyn, Matt Sanders did Westfall, Mark Downey did Red Ridge, and I did Duskwood. Also just as a trivia for the listeners, if you actually look at all of the trees for the most part, and all of the terrain textures in all those zones, they're all the same. They just have color shifts. A lot of people don't notice that because they were all supposed to be one area originally, right, and that got changed. But anyways, more to the point, I'm thinking for Classic that, at least for this demo, it's probably going to be Elwyn and Durotar. And the reason, and I'll go away from Westfall and Barrens because both of them contain instances. I don't know if they're ready for that. I have no idea. But
well, I guess they could just lock us off from going in there in a way, couldn't they?
The easiest way for them to do that without putting down like invisible barriers everywhere is just to not populate anything.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's not like the original WoW beta, like where we didn't want you to go into a new zone that was under construction. Because everyone's seen it, we don't care. They're not going to care if you go into Westfall and there's nothing there to do because it's whatever. You've been to Westfall before. And the reason I'm saying this because I don't think they want to handle instances. And plus, again, Vanilla Barrens sucked. And I don't think they want to fucking do that for the demo. It was huge. It was just so big. Literally it'd be like, oh, hey, Alliance, here's Westfall. You've got 2 hours of gameplay. Oh, here's the Horde version of that. You have 16 hours.
Yeah.
Have fun, So I think it's probably going to be 2 starter zones.
A very fair point in terms of balancing the content. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, exactly. I could also see Tirisfal as the other potential. And that might actually make it easier for them because then they don't have to do 2 separate continents. They can just do them both on one.
Well, they mentioned you'll be able to kill Defias and Quillbore, so that's why everyone's jumped on Elwyn and Durotar. Yeah,
it's probably going to be Durotar. I don't think they're going to. I have no idea what they're going to do, but I can't imagine they're going to try to give you guys Barrens for the demo.
Well, you talked about invisible walls, and we joked about the velvet rope in EQ before, and people were sort of saying like, hang on, how can they even do that? How would they possibly, if they dropped us in the middle of Elwyn for a demo, stop us from going into Westfall or into Duskwood or anything like that? And I was of the opinion, right. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's probably pretty fucking easy. How would they go about doing that? Why don't you explain it?
To put down invisible walls?
Yeah. I mean, it's
literally
very easy,
just an invisible wall.
It's literally just
not a hard thing to
do. So they pop in a wall and you just can't see it.
Yeah. It's just an object with collision on it that has no textures and you just can't run through it. And now the thing is we never did that in vanilla, like in classic or, we didn't ever that was like a huge rule. Like, we'll never put an invisible wall up for the player because we hated any game that did that. And this is World of Warcraft, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. So we did everything in our power to not do that. But that doesn't mean for the demo, they're not going to do that to keep you inside the zone boundaries. But at the same time, like I said, if I was there, I'd be like, who cares if they leave? Like, we won't put any content out there. We'll just remove everything. That's not hard to do. you know. So screw it. Just if they want to run off to Westfall, it's like there's no spoilers. You know what I mean? It's not like it was back in beta. Like it's all spoiled. Everyone knows what's out there. There's just nothing to do. It's just empty terrain.
Yeah.
Who cares? You know? So yeah, I doubt they're actually going to make much of an effort to keep people from leaving the zones. But even then, if they wanted to, like I said, the invisible wall thing, that's not much effort. That's, in fact, like looking back on it now, if I had invisible walls to put down, it would have taken me less than 15 minutes to close off L1.
Yep. What are your thoughts in general about the potential success or failure of Classic WoW?
I have a real hard time answering that question. Cause I have this funny feeling that it's going to do really well for like a month or two.
Yep. And
then
drop off.
It's going to be a big drop. Like, okay, there's definitely going to be a huge spike. That I know. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how much that's going to be retained.
Yep.
And then the other questions I have, and the community has this too, is like, what are they going to do post release?
Yep.
Like, is it just gonna, are they gonna like give us what they gave us on launch and then slowly start releasing things up until right before Burning Crusade and then stop? And then what? Stop forever? Like, the reason why MMOs keep going is because content keeps being created. And so I don't know.
It's ripe for speculation, obviously, and John Stats and a lot of people have obviously commented on this as well. And it's actually one of my great observations of you guys who worked on the game, the former developers, is the amount of perplexity and the head scratching that you, as you say, you're not even really sure how to address the question because there are certain design principles that move MMOs forward. So I completely appreciate where you're coming from. They're totally valid questions in terms of, well, what are we going to do when you get to the end of vanilla? Are you just going to, and obviously the options before Blizzard, the player base speculates about things like, well, you roll through the original trilogy again, give us Burning Crusade Classic, give us Wrath of the Lich King Classic, or you roll out new content for us in the vein of Classic, give us a patch 1.13 and just do stuff we never saw before. So that's all speculation, and I totally get that. Right. But I do appreciate where you're coming from in terms of, I think it's fun to see that the noodle scratching that goes on and goes, that sort of doesn't compute. That goes against everything a game developer would stand for, where your MMO kind of has an end point.
Right. Well, it's not just that, so here's the thing, like I knew people that played on, Nostralis, that tried to get me to come play with them. Mm-hmm. They were like, oh, it's so awesome. It's vanilla. You'll love it and blah, blah, blah. And I thought about it several times, but just never pulled the trigger on it, for various reasons. But even then I kept thinking like, but what happens like when I get to the end game? Like eventually, so in original vanilla, I was in a raid guild. We did Molten Core. But it stopped there. Like we didn't go on to Blackwing's Lair. None of that stuff. We just did Molten Core. And that was fine and that was fun and that was cool. But like, let's say they release Classic all the way up to Nax, basically all the way up to right before Burning Crusade comes out. And okay, now there's all that content, and that's a lot of content to burn through, especially under vanilla rules. A lot more time sinks, a lot slower paced game, gonna take you a while. Plus, okay, fine, I get into a raiding guild. Still, there's a point to where, I will complete everything. I'll get all of the best gear. I cannot get any more. And that is the end. Now that might take a long time, but I didn't, even with Nostralis, I didn't understand like why, why would you want to do that? Why would, cause there is an end to it. And that's the whole point. It's like, there's no end. I think that, for me personally, once I got to that point, I'd probably just be like, okay, I have all the best gear, and I'd probably play for another month or two, helping out my guild, and my presence online would just start to deteriorate because there's nothing else for me to do other than the community. So what I'd personally like to see out of the classic stuff is to go ahead and relaunch the game from scratch. No molten core, none of that stuff. Just release what they had. Kind of literally play it back through time, right? And even at the, the same time frames, take the same amount of time between releases.
A complete recreation.
Complete recreation. And then once, Nax is finished and they're getting ready, to launch Burning Crusade, they lock the server and then they launch the Burning Crusade server, right? Now, you can lock your character. In fact, you could basically make a dupe onto Burning Crusade. That's how I'd like to see it.
Yep.
You make a dupe of your character onto Burning Crusade. You play through that, and then same thing. They recreate history. And then they lock Burning Crusade and launch Lich King. And the same thing happens. So anytime I can go back and go, I want to play Burning Crusade. And I can go back and just pick that character up where I left him off. Even though that character is persistent and now in Lich King or Mists of Pandaria or whatever, Cataclysm, right? But it's basically instances of my character locked in time, for each of those expansions. That to me would be a lot more entertaining and fun. Logistically speaking for Blizzard, not super hard, just expensive.
Yeah. I think
because now they've got a ton of servers they gotta manage.
I totally appreciate where you've all sort of come from in terms of the queries behind if it ends somewhere, then what's the fun behind it? I guess my driving force is really, you think of the concept of, we laugh about, Back to the Future and jumping in the DeLorean with Doc Brown and all that stuff. And it's a chance it's a do-over, really. It's a sliding doors moment for me where I get to do it all again and I get to do some things differently. And that's sort of, even if it does have an endpoint for me, that's the personal driving motivation where I just go, I'm a little bit older, I'm a little bit wiser, maybe a little bit smellier, whatever. At least I get to make some different decisions. And I think it's a lot of people are driven by that fun sort of alternate reality.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I know when Classic launches, I'm going to roll a warrior. And that's because that's a lesson I learned is you're either healing or you're tanking. If you want to do instances. And that's what I like to do when I play the
somebody's got to do the damage as well.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's a million DPS running around.
Yeah.
My main is a mage, and I just don't even try to queue up unless I've got a couple hours to kill, because what's the point? It's going to take me at least a half an hour to get into a dungeon run. Now, if I'm playing my monk, I'm in 30 seconds for my priest, so that's definitely what I would do next time around. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping that all the stories I've heard about the Nostrala server are true, and that the game itself organically created the community that we had back then. Because it definitely,
Nostalia's had a great community.
Yeah. Nobody is wrong when they say the community is completely different. That is so true. It was a very different time back then. And that is by far the thing I miss the most. The community was awesome. Well, and yeah, I'm afraid they won't capture it, but I hope they do.
Oh, I hear what you're saying totally. But given sort of obviously your vast amount of experience as a developer and knowing the inner machinations behind sort of what goes into making the game and how the work goes on under the hood, now that we know that we are getting a playable demo, albeit only 2 zones in 5 to 6 weeks at BlizzCon, what would you say that should mean to people waiting for Classic in terms of a release date. Now, the speculation is out of control on this one. Are we getting it in 3 months, 6 months, at the end of 2019 for the 15th anniversary, 2020 plus, as John Stats has said, 2021, like whatever. But if we have a playable demo and now it's tangible, what do you think that means for how close this thing might be?
2 weeks ago, when John said 2020 plus, I agreed with him wholeheartedly.
Uh-huh.
And then I saw that they were going to have playable demo at BlizzCon, and I went, oh yeah, 2019.
Okay.
Cause if they're there right now, then they're a hell of a lot closer than we thought they were.
Hmm.
So, I mean, there's a lot, like, you know, I read Reddit and I read a lot of stuff on Classic WoW and just RWoW and whatnot. And, you know, I've seen a lot of the conversations, and there's a lot of misconception out there about, what Blizzard has at their disposal. There's a lot of people that just say, oh, well, they have the original code base. And so they can, you know, do X, Y, and Z, and Astralis didn't have it. And they were making guesses and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, okay, here's the thing. Blizzard does not have the original code base. They made that very clear when they shut down Astralis, and Mark Kern went and talked with them, because they did like every other developer does. They just built on top of what they had, right? And also on top of that, as if you go to the World of Warcraft official site, to their classic page, like, there's devs on there talking about the changes that have been made over the years, just programmatically, that have changed everything, right? That's not easy to, like, just go back in time and fix, because again, they didn't lock down, okay, here's, you know, World of Warcraft 1.0, and the code base was put in a vault somewhere. They didn't do that. They did that with what are called builds. A build of a game is a compiled version of the game. You take all the code, all the assets, and you put it into the playable version of the game that the public is going to get to. That's a build. The code base is what gets compiled, right? I guarantee you, yes, they have builds of all the different versions of WoW, but they don't have the code base for it. They don't have the original crap that they were doing. It's all like, literally it's guesswork. And if they're lucky, they've got Excel sheets laying around with formulas and stuff. So there's been they've had to do a lot of, you know, reverse engineering of their own work, just to get there. And again, as a lot of people pointed out too, like, most of the people that launched the original WoW, we don't work there anymore, you know? And even the ones that did, or that do still work there, they don't remember that was 20 years ago almost, you know? We're not going to remember those exact things that we did to handle this particular situation. So, you know, I think that, you know, going forward, you know, everyone needs to kind of understand that that is the case. But once they announced that they were going to have playable demo at BlizzCon, that broke it didn't break everything, but it's like, it moved the timetables up vastly.
Yep.
Because we didn't know how long it was going to take them to reverse engineer all that stuff and get it all up and going. And now, yeah, they've got it. They got it playable at least. And again, like the instances, that's not like going to be some crazy thing. It's going to be more along the lines of what they're probably working on right now, is what they're dealing with BFA, like with the stat squish that they did. I don't know if you've seen all the crap that's been going on there with like the time walking dungeons.
A little bit, lately.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the stat squish screwed up all kinds of things. They're going to be dealing with that type of problem right now. Is, you know, they've got the basics up and running probably. And now it's just fine tuning. Okay. So, my bigger question really is there going to be a PTR for it?
Well, that's the next question.
So when?
Yeah, let's go into that a little bit. So I'm not sure if you've heard, but again, in the last sort of like 24 hours, even though the post is a few days old now, there's been people talking about this purported leak that, you know, you absolutely take with a grain of salt whenever you hear something like this. And it's all completely unattributed, blah, 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 blah. But I'm not going to go into sort of the truth of what was said, but I do want to push you on two little sticking points from this supposed leak that came out. And one of the suggestions was that, number one, there's not going to be a long beta. Number one, there's not going to be a long beta phase with Classic. And number two, the launch is going to be somewhere in April to June, that window of 2019. So just dealing with the beta thing, firstly, you've talked about whether or not they're going to do PTRs. And let's say we get this demo for a week and that's all well and good. After that, would you envision that Classic would require a long regular beta phase, or it might actually be quite shorter?
So I will first just say they have to have a beta. That will definitely happen. Mm-hmm. How long it's going to be, I don't know. I mean, as far as I know, other than games like Fortnite and whatnot that are still in beta that have been released, right? Because that seems to be like the thing nowadays is like, oh, this is beta, because that way we can pretend like there's like we know about the bugs or whatever. But like, I don't think there's been any game that has had a longer beta than WoW ever did. That was like, you know, I mentioned at the very beginning of this, like Blizzard taught me so many horrible things about the game industry. That was one of them. Most game companies are like, oh yeah, beta's a week long. At Blizzard, it was like 10 months or something. It was like this ridiculous amount of time. I think that honestly, I probably would agree with the leak. I don't think it's going to be a long, and I think it's because they don't need it to be long. They don't need to test server stability. They have that down, right? They don't need to test, balance issues. Because again, it's not that they have it down, but if they've got the numbers, if they've been able to reverse engineer those numbers and pull them out, they're not going to, they're going to do everything they can not to tweak those, right? They want to give you the authentic experience. So they're not going to be playing with them. They're just going to try to get them back to what they were originally, right? There's a lot of things that go into the beta tests that they don't need to test. So yeah, I don't think it'll be long at all. I think it'll probably be a couple of months, maybe 3 at the most. And even then, the other thing that they learned with the original open beta was that if anything, if it goes longer, it's only going to be just to drive hype. But I don't even know if they want to do that at this point, because why would they? The hype's already there. So yeah. If anything, it's going to be just to make sure that everything's working correctly, quote.
Right.
So it's not going to be a true beta like most games have. They don't need player feedback on, is this class fun? Anything like that.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter. And by the way, people are going to bitch about it anyway.
They absolutely will. Well, focusing on the second part of my question in terms of release date, when this, again, supposed leak says somewhere in the window of April to June of 2019 is when launch is supposedly coming. Again, knowing that we've got a small portion of the game ready to be presented to the world and played, do you think that is a likely or achievable window of time?
From the limited information I would say it's possible. I'm not going to say likely. The only reason I don't want to say likely is because I don't have any information other than what you have. Reddit has.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Like I said, like the thing, like I totally agreed with John. I was thinking 2020. Yeah. Maybe 2021. Just based on everything I'd heard up until that point and knowing game development and knowing what they were going to have to go through. Like, the game I'm working on currently has changed dramatically from the game it was when I started just a year ago. And we do not have those files. We can't go back in time a year and replay those old versions of the game. We have builds that we can play, but we don't have the original code and all that stuff. It's all overwritten. That's just the nature of the beast. That's what happens. You have to move quickly. And there aren't custodians going, we need to save this for, posterity's sake or whatever.
Right.
Like that just like that's on no one's mind. Maybe they're doing that now at Blizzard, but definitely back then, no way. But yeah, I think at this point, I mean, that announcement that they're going to be, at BlizzCon with it, that threw a giant monkey, wrench in the works. So yeah, I don't know, man.
All right.
I gotta say, I'm actually hoping June, and I'm also really hoping the other thing too is that, it comes with a retail sub. That would be nice.
Yeah, well, I mean, we might as well just lightly address a few of the things in this league now that you seem to have a fair few takes on it. But in regards to the sub, I mean, I know it's too hard to say because you haven't been there for so long, but what were your thoughts as a fan in terms of the proposal that you might be included in the retail sub, but perhaps have the option to pay a little bit less for Classic only?
I think that's an awesome idea, actually.
Do you think it's likely something Blizzard would consider?
Oh, totally. I'm honestly, I was shocked, that they gave out StarCraft for free. The original StarCraft, that is.
Right.
When they redid it, cause they easily could have got people to pay for it. And the difference between that and WoW is server cost, right? WoW has a definite upkeep cost that StarCraft doesn't. And so with that being the case, like it requires some kind of constant influx of income for them. Be that a subscription or as games do nowadays, microtransactions all the time or whatever. But it's got, it's got to have income to justify it. Those servers, not cheap. I remember when I was in QA, we were still working with the original BattleNet, and they were changing it around, for Diablo 2, the interface for it and stuff. And they announced that they were going to start putting banner ads in that lobby for Diablo 2 and StarCraft and all that stuff. And there was this huge fan backlash, right? Because, there's going to be ads now. And it was just a single banner ad at the top of the screen in the lobby that you're in, that you don't even notice. But everyone freaked out. And the kicker was that like, I finally asked, around higher ups, like, why do we have to do that? Cause again, I'm totally green at this point. I'm in QA. Like, why do we have to do that? And the answer was, well, because, we have these servers that are running BattleNet and they cost like $50,000 a month each. Like, and we're not making any money off of them. Like, we're just giving them out to people for free. And that was back in like 1998 at $50,000 a month, and that was just for the few servers they had. And now looking at it, in 2018, with God knows how many they have for Hearthstone, Overwatch, WoW, Heroes of the Storm, all that crap, like, they've got to be paying probably millions of dollars monthly or something ridiculous just for their servers. So yeah, there's going to be a cost. 100%. And I'm okay with that. And, and I think it's even better if they allow people to pay less to do just Classic because there's obviously some demand there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
The one thing I would say from the leak that I'm not sure if I agree with is the server.
The servers.
numbers.
Yeah, that's the one everyone's picking on.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I can see it, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I didn't play in Australis or anything. I never played on a private server, so I don't know Are a lot of those PvP?
Well, it's one of those things.
You know?
They broke it down, apparently. It says 8 servers per region, 4 being PvP, 2 PvE, 1 RP PvP, and 1 RP PvE.
Right.
And the only thing is, I mean, don't get me wrong, as I said, it was originally put up in German, I believe, and some things might be lost to translation. Right. But, you know, however, whatever 8 servers per region means, but, you know, let's say it was 8 North American servers. I mean, I'm presuming that even if you were to go, let's say you went ballistic and said, well, if they do Blizz-like numbers, and I don't know, 5,000 per server, well, now what? There's only 40,000 people in North America plan to play Classic. Let's say they go nuts and it's 10,000 per server, and now it's what? There's only 80,000 people in North America planning to play Classic according to Blizzard. Like, it doesn't add up to me.
Right, yeah. So for me, so the total number, I'm not super surprised by the low number. WoW launched only with 20 servers. Right. And, you know, and they went to capacity almost immediately. They scrambled really hard to get more, as fast as they could. But even then, like, you know, I like looking at 8 right now, like, yeah, I think that's a little on the low side. You know, I'd say at least 10, but also the bigger one for me is the split. 4 PvP servers. Right. Half of them are PvP. And I'm like, I don't know. You know, if I remember correctly back then,
it would have been the other way around.
Yeah, it was mostly PvE. So, but then again, I mean, maybe, yeah, I mean, they're going to do a ton of market research on this, right?
Yeah.
You know,
well, I can
really
tell you,
try to find out who it is.
Just from going based off of what, you know, the Countdown to Classic, the podcast is a community-driven show. I talk to a lot of people from the community. They call in, they tell me their thoughts and dreams and hopes about Classic. The vast majority of people who call in are all in on PvP. So if that's anything to take with it, how the market has developed over the years, which obviously is in contrast to how Blizzard initially thought World of Warcraft would go, when you say that you guys sort of weren't even thinking that PvP might be in the game at all. And now over the years, people absolutely love it. So maybe that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff that I've read, you know, people talk about PvP a lot, like on our Classic WoW and whatnot. But generally they're talking about the early battlegrounds. And or, you know, the infamous, you know, Honor Point rollout with Terran Mill and South Shore. Right? I don't see a lot of talk about PvP servers specifically. I could be totally wrong. You know, for all I know, yeah, that there's more demand for that from this specific community than I'm seeing, but you know, but back then it was definitely, the split was way more PvE. Yeah. I had a lot of friends that, sorry, just real quick. I had a lot of friends that they wanted to start. They're like, oh, I'm totally doing PvP. And within like a month, they're like, what PvE server are you on? I'm going to come join that one. So that was pretty common.
You bring up a great point, because really we have to distinguish the kind of people who are the hardcore fans who obviously listen to a World of Warcraft Classic podcast in this kind of detail, you know, a year before the game's release or more. These are the, you know, the real, we're talking about like the 1%ers, the people who are really dedicated to the game. The vast majority of consumers are going to be much, much, much more casual fans. And they might, and even though the people listening to this might gravitate towards PvP because they might have played on private servers, and private servers are mainly PvP based, the vast majority of people who buy into Classic may very well be PvE based. So maybe that's why my assumption is a little bit skewed in terms of the desire for PvP, but who knows? One more thing I'd like to question you about is, whilst we're just sort of, we might as well go through almost everything with the leak. What do you think about when they say something like, 17 devs are on the WoW Classic team? Does that sound like a pretty fair number, or you would have thought higher or lower?
That sounds about perfect, actually. Yeah, they don't, pretty much everyone on that team is probably going to be programmers, maybe a couple of tech artists. They don't need designers, really. They may have one or two, but even then they could probably just cherry pick from other teams. Just to like, kind of like, hey, can you make sure these numbers are right? Kind of thing. and not so much a situation of like, because again, they're not trying to make a right. They're just trying to recreate one.
Yep.
With all the information that they have. Like they don't need any quest designers. They probably, like, if they're at the stage where they're at right now, I'm pretty sure they've reverse engineered most of it. They've been able to crack it open. And once they can do that, they can analyze a lot of information. Mob placement, spawn times. Like, if they can get into those databases, they can just pull it all out, you know, and once they have the information, they can just recreate it. So they don't need a ton of people to do this. One thing I keep seeing get brought up is the fact that people are like, oh, there's 2 people from Nostralius on the team. Okay. Again, I think that, as you pointed out, you know, it was originally a German translation. I have a funny feeling that there's 2 people from Nostralius that are consultants or contractors.
Right.
They're not, I don't think that they're full-time employees, and I don't think that they're part of that 17. It's probably, you know, 17 plus those 2 as consultants.
Right. But you've heard that there are people from Nostarius, involved with Blizzard.
I read that whole leak, today, actually.
Right.
I was going through Classic WoW today before we did this.
Sorry, but I mean, prior to reading the leak, had you heard that anyone from Nostarius was involved with Blizzard?
No.
Oh, okay.
I hadn't heard it. I had no idea how many people were on the team. You know, I'm going purely off that link.
Yeah, gotcha.
So
I guess the last point from the leak that we'll just cover is when they say that Classic WoW is currently in a pre-alpha state. Mostly all the quests are done. They started working on Dungeons and Battlegrounds. Now, again, lost in translation. I'm not sure if they're saying they started the classic project by working on Dungeons and Battlegrounds, or if they're saying they have now started working on the Dungeons and the Battlegrounds. But what would you say about, you know, the suggestion that if we're getting a demo coming up soon, it's in a pre-alpha state with mostly the quests done?
I would say that's probably accurate. Like I was saying before, once they've cracked the code, right? They've done the reverse engineering. They've pulled out the data. Cause that's the problem, right? Is they, you know, the first problem that they have to overcome is pulling the data out, getting it in its original form. And then they have to, you know, it's literally a translation, because the WoW code base today is not the WoW code base that shipped, right? They need to translate it. And that's what, you know, they're not going to ship it in, you know, vanilla form, because that code base is dead. So they have to translate it over into the new one and get it working. And it sounds like they've cracked the code. You know, they've pulled all the data out. They've got it. It's just the matter of getting it over into a playable condition with a new code base. And that, again, that lines up perfectly with the way that I would do it, which is start with the open world, right? Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor. Do those first, get them populated with mobs and quests. Because again, it's just data. They just have to plug it in, but there's that translation. That's the problematic part. And then move on to the instances. And battlegrounds and dungeons and raids are all instances.
Right.
They're all separately handled. So that makes perfect sense to me. Like that's where they would be. And the only reason they probably call it a pre-alpha state is because of that, is because they probably did a loose translation of the data into the new code base, and they've run around and they've played it, and their QA has, you know, run around and played on it, and there's no glaring problems, right?
Okay.
It all seems to be working just fine.
Yeah, which is why they'd obviously be comfortable presenting it to the world, I guess.
Right. And that's why you call it pre-alpha, though, is because, you know, it seems to be working fine.
Right. Now, so, I mean, one question I had for Alex, which I'm still a bit confused about myself, as I said, I'm not really, you know, very well versed at all in the ins and outs of game development, but, you know, there has been a little bit of chat between people going, well, we all know how it used to go back in the day when you'd get your demos on your CDs with, free samples with magazines and things like that. But in terms of the order, when we go, does it go demo, alpha, beta, or alpha, beta, demo, final product? Like, where does this fit into things?
So demos are completely separate from alpha, beta.
Okay.
So you start with an alpha, and an alpha is always your roughest build. It's your first take on the game, right? It's playable. It works. Depending on the game is going to tell you how much content is in there. But generally you're talking a game that's got, of total content that they plan to ship with, it's going to have like 20 to 30% of the content in the game. So in a case for like WoW, you're talking like a few zones. And even then, only major systems are implemented. So again, talking WoW, you can kill shit, you can turn in quests, you can loot things, and there's maybe a couple of professions that are working, right? And even then, they're in total infancy stage during the alpha. In beta, it's just pile on more. Now the game is probably closer to anywhere from 60 to 80% done. And again, depending on the game, depending on the studio, when they want to put it in beta, that's where it's going to be. WoW went into beta probably at about 50 or 60% for the closed beta. When we went to open beta, it was probably closer to 60 to 70%. But again, those numbers are kind of weird because it's like some systems were much closer to 100% than others. There's so much to WoW, right? I mean, it's zones, it's total number of quests, it's class, it's professions, all that stuff, right? And all those were at varying degrees of completion when we went into the various alphas and betas. But it always starts with alpha, it leads into beta. Usually, so alpha is always closed. It's generally considered friends and family only. Mm-hmm. And then you'll go into a closed beta, which is, starts with the friends and family alpha and expands, so for WoW, as an example, we did a couple of friends and family alphas before we did like the real one, quote unquote. And when we did the real one, it was, you can invite 5 people, and they gave us each 5 keys to send to people to join the alpha, right? And then about a month or two later, they sent us 10 more keys and said, okay, we're going into, and that was for what they called the tri-horde push, because the first alpha that we did for that particular alpha, was, the human and dwarf starting zones, basically up to, I think the level cap was 25 or 30, something like that. Then they locked out all the Alliance characters and opened up the Horde. But unlike what we did with the Alliance, because with the Alliance, first they did dwarf only, then they did human only, then they did human and dwarf. Night Elves didn't even come online until later. And then they did the tri-horde push, which was all the Horde races opened up at the same time. And at that point, when they did that, it was like, oh yeah, here's 10 more keys. And then like a couple months later, they're like, here's 20 more keys. And then they're like, we're going to go to open beta, because that was now closed beta. And when they went to open beta, they were like, here's 100 keys. And I was like, dude, like, I don't even know 100 people. Like, I mean, I gave out all of my keys. Like I at that point, I probably had like 120 keys. I was just like, stop giving me keys. I can't do anything with these, unless you just want me to go down to the Irvine Spectrum and just start handing them out to random people or UCI or something. So yeah, that's, and then a demo is always like off to the side and usually a giant pain in the ass for the developers.
Okay.
Like E3, like, oh, we're going to do an E3 thing. Oh, great. Everybody stop working on what you're working on so we can prop up something to look cool for E3.
Right.
I don't expect that that's what you're going to hit for BlizzCon. That's going to be like an alpha stage demo. It's probably going to be better than alpha because it's not a brand new game out of the ether.
So we'll call
this one's going to be in a weird state.
We'll call it somewhere of a mix between a beta and an alpha, a balfa.
Yeah, it's going to be something like that.
All right. Well, look, Bo, I must thank you so much. Like you've made it through the interview. You've done the hard yards. You've provided us with just an absolute wealth of knowledge again. And the podcast very much so has become not so much as much an analysis of the game as a little bit of an anthology of the history of the making of the game as well. And the more and more developers, or former developers, I should say as well, that can come on and discuss the game and fill in all the little holes of their roles in the game and how things came to be is so amazing to hear about. And now that I've gotten 3 of you out of the way, John Stats, Alex Brazzi, yourself, and I've got Kevin Jordan waiting on the line in about 2 minutes. That's almost a handful out of the way, and I really hope to get more and more of you. And all I can say is just thank you so much. We've been talking for almost 3 hours now. You've taken the time out for the show, and I'm sure the thousands of listeners of Countdown to Classic are very, very grateful for your time. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Look, we'll have to stay in touch, mate. And if I can ever reach out to you for a comment on anything later down the track that comes, I'd love to be able to talk to you again on the show.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Yep, bye.
That's the show for the day, everyone. Just before I let you go, I just want to shout out to some very dedicated patrons of Countdown to Classic. So shout out to Flozy B, Palfurus, Permadrunk, Rarebit, Romani, The Anton, Wilson Ma, and Velarco. Thank you so much for your phenomenal support of the show. Countdown to Classic would not be the same without your support. And also a big thank you to supporters Bossman764, Hurlbert, Good Kisser, Myrtlebanks, Purgatos81, and Zudamos as always. That's it from me for the week, everyone. So signing off from Down Under. Have a great weekend.